replacement charge would be going to the debt service fund, and the $234,000 will be going to the capital projects fund to finance and offset those projects. The other thing to note in the general fund budget is in the finance department, in the 2025 fiscal year, you'll see the outsourced services for finance for a full year, which will then be a big difference if you compare it to 2024. And then also we have shown you a 6% increase in the property tax levy overall for the general fund. So following the general fund budget, you'll see the special revenue funds of the village, one of which is the library, which we know has a separate board. We'll be discussing their budget as well, but that is a special revenue fund of the village. And then the senior center in Shorewood today is followed by that. The library property tax allocation is the only fund there that would be affected greatly by your property tax increase, in addition to the village's funds. And then the debt service fund and capital projects fund, just by their names, are there to help finance and pay off debt service and capital projects. The debt service fund itself, the expenses that are recorded in there are financed by property tax levies. So that offset of the $700,000 that will be moved into there if we implement the streetlight system replacement charge would help offset the property tax levy that you would need to make for your debt service related to that project into the future. Capital projects fund then is what we are showing to finance all of the village's capital projects. And there was approximately $900,000 worth of capital project requests, which we show in here in its entirety. And then the other capital projects funds of the village are the TIDs, which are governed by the plans that set them up. And then that culminates all of the governmental funds of the village. The remaining funds of the village are then the enterprise funds, which are financed by fees and charges, including the parking utility, the water, and the sewer fund. And the one thing I do want to point out, which oftentimes is lost in translation for many when it comes to this whole budget and how it fits together, is that we have certain departments that actually are allocated amongst various funds at the village. So when you look at a department like Public Works, they are part of the general fund, and then they are also within the sewer and the water utility fund. So when we're looking at salaries related to Public Works employees, they get allocated amongst the general water and sewer utility fund as well. And so those increases are partially financed by the sewer charges and the water utility charges that we will be increasing as part of our fee increases, as well as part of our rate case that we're doing with City Water for the water utility as well. So that's a summary of how the entire document fits together. And as a reminder, this is our target. This is our first target that we're using to discuss the various options, and it is expected to change and will change. And I'm happy to kick off the discussion and look at the various questions that you may have.
I have a question about the streetlight fee that would be $700,000 a year. So would that be $700,000 in revenue every year for 30 years until the bond's paid off?
Yes, we could collect it as long as we wish. And if we structure the bond for a 30-year period or 2 separate issuances or something, then we can have it open until that time. But yes, it would offset the debt service each year as we collect.
Okay. And is there any difference in the way credit agencies would rate our bond rating if it's from a fee versus tax levy? Is there any difference?
As far as I am aware, there is not. However, I'm sure there are different weights for various financing capabilities. The tax levy is clearly the most direct to the property tax owner, but this being a direct charge that would be on the tax roll anyway, I think would be probably viewed the same.
Yep.
Aren't construction bonds usually 20? Yes, the schedule was allocated based upon a 20-year borrowing, but because the last borrowing would occur in year 5, that's why it spans the 20-year, 25-year timeframe. So 5 years for construction, then 20 years to finish that final borrowing. 25 in total.
When breaking down the salary increases at $422,000, could you just remind me what the $170,000 was for?
Sure. The $170,000 is the 3% cost of living adjustment increase for the minimum. And then the remainder of $250,000 approximately is for increases related to the salary study that was conducted.
Thank you.
And so can we see what the recommendations are for that $250,000, which jobs should go where? I personally, I can support the 3% COLA across the board for everyone. The $250,000 for the specific jobs, I guess I need to see, where they would go. I know, and I don't know if we're looking, Trustee Kudo had talked about an entire employee package. I think it's important to note that there are people in the village, I believe 2 people who have a vehicle and fuel to get to and from work every day. And I don't know if that's still the status quo for everyone else, but I think we need to figure that out because that can have a lot of value. Has that been considered or?
Yes, there are line items in the budget that already have expenditures for those amounts, and they are only being increased at a 3%, expenditure increase in the budget currently.
I mean,
those
as an employee benefit.
Oh,
So
we
you're
can-
talking about,
yeah.
if I believe one of the positions would be the public works, 2 public works people get last year, I think they're brand new vehicles and the fuel to come to and from work. And if that's an industry standard still today, I need to know that. And if it's not, I think it's something that we need to look at if we're looking at specific pay increases for specific jobs. That would be part of the pack. And then we also talked about, healthcare.
Mhm.
No,
We can look into that. Thank you for the question.
When looking at the $190,000 COLA increase or $170,000 COLA increase that Trustee Ursink referenced,
Mhm.
the 252 would then be broken out among just those 9 positions that were referenced
The
earlier.
252 is everybody.
252 is everybody.
Yeah, Chris, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, is it everybody across the village or is it just those
Right.
9 positions that you referenced in the salary study?
When we looked at the original back on the 3rd,
Yeah.
we had 22 positions that were listed.
Right.
The original recommendation, as we were still kind of building this up, was to address those initial 5 that were highlighted. This then looks at all 22 that were below market. So we had that 71% figure where 22 job titles within, I don't have that full number of
Right.
personnel, but 22 job titles when compared for the salary survey of the 31 that were under market would be all addressed within this budget proposal.
So when you say addressed, what does that mean?
Would be, and I think that Trustee Stokebrand had a similar question. I think just kind of wanting to understand where we arrived at various places for how to establish the new median or a midpoint, excuse me. Looking at the salary survey, the recommendation that I came up with was to establish our midpoint at the average of our 9 peer municipalities.
Okay.
So that establishes a new midpoint. We also then, instead of the nature of how our wage ranges work all over the place, it's standardized a 40% wage range so that gives us a little bit more flexibility within that interquartile range or that 25 to 75% pay rate or like on the scale. So that we have some ability to kind of standardize when we onboard somebody.
And I know the library is a little bit different because not all of the library positions are listed in the salary study.
Right.
How does the 252,000 affect those library positions? Some who haven't seen raises in quite some time.
If they're on this list that I provided on the 3rd, they're,
included.
yes. But if
So-
they are not, if they're not on that list, I know that like, for instance, say shelvers have a different shelver pay,
Right.
but pretty much every other library position, assistant director, library director, clerks are all within this list.
So how do we make sure that we're not leaving certain staff behind who just didn't make that list?
That would be a library board decision, I imagine. Excuse me, Manager Ewald, if you have additional feedback, that they're just,
So, I mean, you know, because there are staff members, shelvers you mentioned that are not part of that, or not part of the salary study, but are still valued employees of the village. And so I want to make sure that, you know, people aren't being left behind because they weren't part of a study. It doesn't seem like it would be terribly difficult to look at those as well when looking at the total dollar amount.
So my understanding from how the library positions were identified before, and this kind of predates Chris, is that the library identified the positions that they want us to gather data on. We don't decide
Okay.
that because we don't create their classifications and positions. And
Right.
so the ones that he looked at were the ones that have been looked at and were recommended to look at by the library in the past. So if the library wants to propose some other way to look at it, we're happy to do that, but it was not our-
there's a shelver pay policy, if I'm not mistaken. And, there's even a shelver manual of how to
Mhm.
move
Uh,
through and.
Maybe that played into it, maybe it
Sure.
didn't. I didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
really ask.
I don't know how
Yeah,
the salary structures, how the salaries were structured in the past or how the surveys were completed in the past.
Mhm.
I do know from being liaison to the library board that there are members of staff that are not. And I want to make sure that if we're able to include them moving forward as either part of the 252,000 additional above COLA, or if we have to make an adjustment to the 252,000, we do that appropriately.
so I think that would just be a connection point between the library director identifying that to go through that. And I know that there was a lot of extensive discussion about the salary file and, who's all in that, but you guys would just need to work that out.
Yep.
Luckily, we have all interested parties in the room, so
Yeah.
I'm sure the two of you will figure that out. Cool.
Did we map out options for phasing in the 252 versus doing all in one fell swoop, or try to get an understanding of what that impact would look like?
We have not presented options, but that is a possibility of where we could go with this. And if you wanted to see options, we would just need to see, do you want it, phased in over 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And then the consideration there is these increases in salaries aren't going to go away. So we're, it just compounds next year's budget. And so
Right.
I always recommend if you have a salary true up, you try to take in as soon as possible, right? Take that as quickly as possible because you can always delay other costs, but it's much harder to replace an employee that you lost than to keep them in the first place.
Do these increases make us at a sort of level playing ground, or are we increasing it to the point where we're more competitive from the communities around us?
This is to keep the staff levels where they are.
This is to keep them where they are.
Correct.
The increase is to keep them where they are.
Correct. The increase is to keep your staff as they are, where they are, no
Oh.
additional staff.
I think
Oh,
you're asking where we land on the wage,
Yeah,
and you're
Oh,
saying
now
the
we're-
FTE
then we'd be
FTEs
trued
don't
up.
change,
right.
right? So I think what Chris said earlier was that we would be somewhere what they did was they averaged.
we'd be somewhere in
We
the
took the
middle. So
average
it
of the
wouldn't be
middle.
the highest or the lowest. We'd be, okay, that's what.
Thank you for that clarification.
What I do.
I guess something that is curious to me is even the previous assistant village manager had done these salaries surveys. So we've been aware of checking with other municipalities, our peer groups. And now it appears that we have a significant gap. And we take staff recommendations for raises every year. So I'm wondering, how did we get here?
We typically do a salary survey every 2 years. Chris came on board during an interim year and had the community survey kind of ramping at the same time. So given his newness, we extended it to 3, and the 3-year we came back to do the check. At the same time, we were kind of tracking and monitoring and because we were seeing such increases. with some of the positions that were being posted and the compensation that was being provided for positions that as little as like a year ago, you would go out and, want to recruit for, and then a year later, we're taking a swing in a much different direction.
And I may add that some other communities did recently increase their salaries as well. And there was a salary study at Glendale that resulted in a significant increase there additionally, which we took into consideration for our salary study at the village.
So can you give us those numbers?
Yeah.
Oh,
The documentation that was sent on Friday morning has I think 9 pages of all of our Shorewood positions as well as every other position title that was collected. So you should
but
have.
I mean, like the increases that Glendale is planning,
Oh, I'm sorry.
proposed, right, though, so you're not in a position.
Well, Glendale's is the most latest and greatest information. So I don't know I did have their original, but I overwrote everything once I received the new data.
And what difference does the size of your municipality make in that? Obviously, Glendale is a city and is got a much larger, we call them peers, but obviously, in many ways, Glendale is not a peer.
Yeah, I think, of course, we all have similar missions. I know we can't speak to when the original peer group was first selected, knowing that we're, of course, not compared to Wauwatosa, it's much different. But, I think that there's good information there with, some, what we received from Cedarburg, what we received from Mequon. So, yeah.
Just going through, just going through the budget a little bit, kind of at Public Works here, and I see, a line item for landscaping at $63,000. Whereas later tonight, we're talking about that sort of landscaping and contract with, for turf, potentially coming in at a much lower rate of $28,000. I'm sure those would be reflected eventually. Is that what you're talking about the flexibility within this overall document?
That's right. So we will be going through a very deep dive with the Budget and Finance Committee scheduled to occur on October 7th, where we're going to go through each department at that time. So we hope that all of those details will be worked out by then.
Okay, and that's just budget and finance. It's not the whole group.
We have listed it so far as committee of the whole.
Okay,
Oh,
that's committee of a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we're not comfortable with 6%, like I'm comfortable with 4%. I'm comfortable with doubling what we've been doing.
Mhm.
But I'm not comfortable with the 6%. I mean, based upon, things I heard at a Wisconsin League webinar and things about stability and the bond market or the markets that issue the bonds wanting stability and taxpayers wanting stability. To triple the annual increase is a really big ask. And I'm wondering if you wanted to get to 4 to 5, how do we do that?
Some of the other options that we noted, like tapping into your recycling and refuse charge that we don't currently have in there, that could be up to $550,000. Tapping into your parking utility fund balance, that could be up to $500,000, and further adjusting your capital project timelines.
And so in terms of a policy decision, when do we decide, are we going to talk about service levels? There's nothing, it's all baked in here to be exactly the same. And so if we're going to ask residents to go along with a 6% property tax level increase, tax levy increase, and also a fee for vehicle registration, for streetlights, but we haven't even had a discussion about service levels. Is that due diligence? In my view, it's not.
Can I ask a question about the streetlight system replacement
Definitely.
charge, please? Can you walk me through how financing for this would work, how we would, obviously we would bond for it, but then if we're raising fees at to the tune of $700,000 a year, which is
Right.
$153 per person, over the lifetime, it's 17.5, but
Mhm.
isn't that sort of just a zero sum game on there as opposed to bringing in new revenues? I mean, when do we start paying the bond back? And are we going to get hit with, if we start collecting in 25, start collecting the 700,000 in 25, right? When are we going to get hit with the bill on the bond so that we're not seeing 700,000 anymore? Or is this just incorrect in my head? Which is
No,
a
I think
distinct
this-
possibility.
No, I think these are all great questions. So because the project's proposed to be phased over 5 years,
Right.
hypothetically, you're borrowing each year in advance once you bid the project, have the
Right.
project come in, because it's, on average, I would say each phase is at least 2.5 million. They range just based upon how they're segmented.
Yeah.
So you're going out, you'd bid the project, you'd bond for it coming into the new year. So you'd have an interest rate assigned to that borrowing. Typically, you don't actually start paying on the bond until the following year, but then you're paying on it for the 20 years going forward. So what we did with the model is we said, okay, the estimate that you have for the charge is based upon what we know. Estimated construction cost, average percentage, or what we're seeing from the market for purposes of borrowing, so that we can actually log it in and adjust it so that it's reconciling each year. Another reason why it's spread out over 25, because we wanted to make sure that everyone was paying only what we were
Building.
building and borrowing for,
Okay.
right? Because we don't know what the change in cost is going to be for wire, right? 5 years out or something.
I'm sure it'll be much less.
I know. But I think like the theory is if the project comes in under, or we realize some like average for savings or something, we want to provide that in the model and have that equally distributed over the whole.
So as an example, we take out, you say for 3 years or whatever. So we take out 2.1 or 2.8 if it's
5
3
years. Yeah, each
5 years.
year
Okay, so
you're borrowing.
3.5. We take out 3.5 million for the first phase of the streetlights.
And it's at 4%.
So, but we start paying back the year after we take it out
Yes.
or the year after we start project,
The year after you borrow.
the year
Yeah.
after you borrow. So if we take it out in 20, we take out 3.5 and 25.
Mhm,
And then in 26, we're starting to pay back
mhm.
at whatever, 700,000 plus 4%. So the question is, I mean, are we going to find ourselves in a big hole 2 years from now because we took out, you know what I mean? And we have to start paying back on those bonds?
So if you reference back the long-range plan
Yep.
where we project all of it out, the $700,000 isn't in there as an offset yet, but we have the project already in there.
Okay,
So this $700,000 a year would
Is-
offset the property tax increase we would have. Because when we go to levy the taxes, we would include that debt service originally, but
Mhm.
now we won't because we know we have this revenue paying it off.
so what will we actually see after paying for the bond, right? So if it's included in there, I'm sorry, this is.
No, I think
No,
that's a
it's
great
an
question.
amazing
Just wanna make sure I
question.
understand.
Yeah.
So we have included the $700,000 a year in the current budget
As a cost.
as a cost. We now, so it's a disbursement. We now
Mhm.
have the potential to have $700,000 roughly in revenue.
Correct.
So that's in 2025, right? Like, just
Mhm.
as an example, say it's 2025.
Mhm.
What are we paying annually
Mm.
on a $3.5 million bond starting in 2026? Is it the $700,000 plus 4%? In which case then we're short 4% of $700,000?
It
Or
will
how does
not
it
come
work
out.
out?
Yeah, it will be either greater or lower, so it's not gonna be exactly that $700,000.
I'm happy with greater. I'm worried about lower.
Mhm.
That
mean,
just means it'll be funneled through the rest of the debt service ask for the property tax levy piece,
So in essence,
which we're already planning for.
if we did the $700,000 for streetlights, then we're almost zeroed out. And we don't have to work, then we don't have to do a number of these things. right?
For streetlights, to
Yes,
pay the
right, it takes
streetlights.
care of that one.
It takes care of streetlights.
Well, what's our, okay, what's our projected 2025 operating deficit as a village?
It's about 700,000 before we built this with the
Right?
various tools in it.
Mhm.
With the tools in it, we are now at $200,000 of a deficit, but
Okay.
we're still not including any of the recycling or the refuse charge.
Any of these
Or the
projected
parking.
revenues?
We are already including the vehicle registration fee and the streetlight system replacement charge. But that's just showing an in and an out, right? So if you decide not to do it, it's not that hard to take out.
Right, I'm just trying to,
But we're not showing anything else. So now you're at that $200,000 deficit.
we're at 200,000. I'm
Because
sorry.
we already have 6% property taxes built in.
Right.
So that's why it's lower than the $700,000 we had originally, because we're showing you that a portion of it is already gonna
Could be,
be
right.
an increase in property taxes, which is what we heard from the discussion last meeting.
Sitting at the 200,000
Mhm.
includes, you're saying, both the vehicle registration fee and streetlight fee
Correct.
And both of those
and the
salary,
6%. And the 6%.
And the salary increases and the 6%.
both salary.
I think the salary increases is where we're off because it was $700,000 deficit and then we're getting $700,000 from the streetlight.
In my mind, I'm
And
like,
now,
this is
now,
zero.
Well-
now there's $200,000 difference.
Because
I
we
think
did,
that's where he's getting. That's
because we
Yeah.
did the 252 in increased employee salary.
Right. Yeah. So it's hard to say now because we're comparing apples to oranges.
I
So
like
the
'em both.
original presentation
Yeah.
only showed a 2% budget or 2% property tax levy increase.
Okay,
And now we have a 6%. So that's
Right.
part of the reason why the deficit has
That's why
gotten
we-
smaller.
reduced it by 400 or 500,000.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then there's the additional cost of the salaries now added in.
okay.
So
Right.
that would make
Got
it
that.
greater, jump it, but then we added some additional tools in already to help offset that. So the net of all those effects ends up being 200,000
A negative.
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 Okay.
But the $252,000 adjustments to bring us up to the highest maximum
Correct.
is included in
Yes.
the $200,000
is.
shortfall.
That's right.
So if we took out, if we decided to do that ramping up to where we're in the higher area where we want to be, we'd be good, but we'd have a 6% tax. We'd be actually 50,000 to the good. Is that correct?
Please clarify what we would change to,
If we took out the 250, if we kept the $170,000 across the board, 3% COLA for all village employees,
Mhm,
but we took out the escalator,
I see.
we would be
Uh,
50,000 to the good.
Approximately, however, as I mentioned before, the Public Works Department is split between the general fund, the water and the sewer fund. And so those increases in salaries are also split. So if we backed it out the $250,000, it may not impact the general fund by that much because a portion of those salaries are allocated to sewer and water and financed elsewhere. So you may end up kind of right at zero if you did that in the general fund and not with a positive $50,000.
And then these numbers do include the new, we're adding staff this year, right? The water superintendent. That includes one additional staff to Public Works, this year, correct? This current plan.
Starting in July, yes.
And if the draft has a 6% property tax levy increase and, you know, Kathy was mentioning she'd be more comfortable with 4. Let's say we did 4 instead, how much would we have to make up for either in other revenue or service cuts?
We can give you the exact dollars on that. But I mean, if I were to estimate at this point, we've seen enough, it's going to be a couple $100,000. I mean, you're
$100,000?
gonna, yeah. I'd say 2% is probably about $200,000.
Okay.
Yeah, wouldn't it be, we have a $12 million budget, right?
Mhm.
So it's like $240,000.
There you go.
It used to be, we used to be at a
Yeah.
$10 million, and so we would talk about how 1% was 100,000. So
Perfect. Yeah.
now
That's
we're at a
perfect.
12 million, so.
Yeah.
We're
it's a-
thinking about it.
There you go.
No,
Little
I
Guy
got it.
Johnson. I apologize for being late, and I don't know who's chairing, but we are in discussion phase, and you're looking for direction tonight or questions?
Questions.
I did have a question. Was there, I thought we were going to increase water rates 40% less next year. And then there would seem to be something that said 64 and I'm looking.
That is
Sorry.
correct. So the water rates are the water rates are built in through what City Water is doing with the PSC rate case, and we're currently projecting a much larger increase. But they are currently also talking with the PSC to see if we could phase that in. So I think that's where the 40% came in, but if we're not allowed to phase it in, then it would be a much bigger hit right off the bat. So I use their numbers from what they used for the long-range planning for the current budget. And then we can update as things work out with the Public Service Commission water rate case.
And when would we know more about increasing water rates, possibly 65%?
We are in the process of submitting the rate case to the PSC currently. So as that works itself out, it will be concluding over the next couple of weeks alongside the budget process.
So previously we had anticipated 40% next year, 0% in 26, and then 5 and 5 in 27 and 28, and then 35 and 29. If we go to a 65, almost a 65% increase for 2025, do you have any idea how that would play out over the next 5 years?
We'd have to
Okay.
project it out differently.
All right.
But
The other
I'm hoping that what you were seeing originally will be what we can do there. The focus is more on the other pieces for the discussion tonight so that we can tackle that water utility piece as part of the PSC rate case when we have City Water present and discuss that with us.
I guess it would be helpful when we go into the budget town halls this Thursday, for example, if someone says, okay, we'll take a 6% property tax levy increase in 2025, and then what can we expect going forward? Is this the one that catches us up for 8 to 9% inflation in 2022, 23? Inflation for the year right now, I believe, year over year, July to July is 2.5. No, you have,
Well, the only reason we have higher inflation in here is for the past, for recognizing that the costs increased so much and we never increased the budget to reflect it. And so some of it is that, and then realizing that things don't just flatten out right away. So inflation might be coming down, but the effects we're experiencing from the heightened inflation
Right.
is still affecting us.
so if someone asks if we go along with the 6% tax levy increase for 25, do you anticipate it flattening out again to 2 to 3, 3 to 4? What would we tell a resident? We just don't know.
Yeah, I do believe it is difficult to project out the future when you are at such a crossroads. Because that future number will depend on which of these levers the board decides to pull as part of the budget process for the 2025 year. And so any deviations or changes from that plan will then affect future budgets as well. And now that there's 5 or 6 different levers that we're tracking, it's hard to say if you pull one and not the other, does that mean an increase or a decrease in future years? It just depends which one you pick.
I guess to me, the most concerning thing is how we've I believe last year we doubled the amount of our operating budget that we'd put towards debt service. I believe we went from 5 to 10, which was the beginning of a big change for us. And when I look now and I see the amount of our budget that we'll be putting towards debt service, it's, you know, like for per household, it's like 3 times for 10 years going forward. And
Definitely.
that's troubling to me because not only does it, I mean, it just affects our
Mhm.
cash flow, quite honestly. We can do so much less because we're going to be paying so much more for debt. And so it would seem that the prudent thing to do would be to slow down the debt so that we have more budget to use for raises and equipment.
Mhm. The debt is financing the capital projects that are in place, forecasted out for the next few years under the LRP. So as you're mentioning, one of the avenues is to change the timeline of those projects, which would then change the debt service.
It doesn't really change the debt service. It prevents the debt from getting higher or,
Or
no,
you
because
take,
what's that?
or taking out new debt.
Right. So it prevents us taking out new debt.
Mhm.
So the debt that we have now is for capital projects that have already been completed, and we're experiencing the benefits of that. So for the people
Mhm.
that had basement backups, the sewer improvements, all those people have been not experiencing that. So that's one way of thinking every time we write a check to the credit card company, you know, to the bank,
Definitely.
basically, right? So if the only thing that delaying, changing the timeline of future capital projects is preventing us from borrowing more. But what that means also is that then the capital projects that have been identified as critical or necessary won't get done, which
Or they would
Yeah.
get done later.
true, but I think they would potentially get done later, differently maybe. I can't play, you know, I'm not a crystal ball or whatever, but it wouldn't apply to the CC project because we're already committed. So there are some that we're already committed to, so there's no,
Yes, and to compound, of course, as you know, with some of the water main projects,
now we
we're in
have,
between a rock and a hard place
the
because we
mandate.
have to do
right,
all of the project. Can't
Right.
just do some of it.
right. Okay, that was my comment on debt service. I did have some other questions, but I'll defer because it
No,
looks like it
you
was
know, I was
related.
just going to say, just kind of adding to that conversation, if we put off projects, they just get more expensive. So I think, you know, that's the kind of hard place we're in is, you know, do we put off this project? If we put off a project, what is going to be less expensive in the future? What is going to cost us more now to maintain? Those are the things that we have to ask if we want to defer things. But, you know, I think, you know, we're in a really, you know, critical situation now. And I think these things all just need to be done and we just need to do them because past boards have pushed them off. And here we are. They're infinitely more expensive than if we would have done them 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that sentiment. But I guess my counter would be, it's no different than sort of your personal budgeting, right? Like, yes, if you need a new car, you don't buy a new car this year, you're gonna be more expensive next year, so on and so forth. I think what we're trying to figure out is at what point are we sort of out of money and out of revenue opportunity, right? I mean, at what point does it become too expensive to live here or to do business here or whatever it happens to be? And so I look at it less as a one or the other, you know, tax levy wise or fee wise or project wise. It's sort of just a huge balancing, right? And how hard can we push before we get massive pushback? And that is people leaving the community, people going somewhere else. Flip side being, if we don't do what we need to do, it's going to be more expensive somewhere down the road. But is it perhaps better because we don't have so many projects stacked up at once You know what I mean? We're not buying a car and a fridge and a washer and a dryer. It's just so expensive right now because we're trying to do everything. But for me, it's, do we have to do everything? There's some things we can just hold off a little bit longer so that, yes, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but we'll have more capital to play with down the road. So it's just, they're just tough questions.
That kind of applies to a future budget. It's not really a 2025. So there's nothing in 2025 that we can pull off from the capital side.
So in your capital budget that's presented to you, one of the recommendations we said was, we could fund only those things that are critical, to your point, and then push everything off until we had a discussion about how we were going to look at our capital assets and fund them moving forward. It's just a short interim step. But there's over 900,000 in there. You've never
critical.
funded anything over like maybe 500 on an annual basis. So those were identified within the scope of your budget book, which were essentially three things. It was APS signals because we got a significant grant for them. Thank you, Director Bushlick. So there's like 7,300 to do that project in 2025. There was, I believe, Christina, the EAB removal, because that just continues, right, if you don't keep up with it. And then the third was the Verkada system for security cameras in the police department. So those were the three that we said, would it be nice to have all of the other things? Yes, absolutely. You can review them, look at their descriptions. But if you're going to exercise that high impact option of really looking at your capital policy, and instead of just getting, just providing all of us a lot more direction based upon how you want to thin, reduce, span out, capital budget, because you're really looking at the next 20, 25 years, right? I mean, you are in any case, but like, how can we work with that so that we can fine tune that number more so for the long range plan to get better recalibrated estimates in terms of what our capacity is. With regards to the question of capital budget is located in your packet. Bonded projects, if there was something that you were gonna put off, the one option really out there is the streetlight system. The tough thing, I think, just about the streetlight system is that it takes 5 years to replace the whole thing. And then as you break it down the phases, each year we're gonna learn and get better because it's not typical to just bid an entire streetlight system. You can't take the whole thing down at one time. It's a safety issue. But then even spanning over 5 years, and I don't know if you recall this, but when we looked at the analysis, we said, okay, what if we did it in 10 years? Or what if we spread it over 10 or 15? The cost just becomes a little volatile. Now, more importantly, I think your technology is going to change a little bit. And then I don't know if the
Our technology,
integration-
what? I'm sorry. Our
technology may change. And so then you start a design in a system that was designed with one thing and then maybe end up in a different, it's just, again, I don't have a crystal ball either, but that is one of the challenges with it.
Well, I think we're gonna have to talk about the Public Works facility. It's out there for 23 million. That was something brought to us by a consultant who designs new facilities. And I think it's time to have a discussion. We're at all of our options. We're looking at real estate. We need to also look at what we would do if we stayed on the site and worked with the site that we have. Where would that cost come in compared to 23 million? That would make, that's the big one-time project that in the long range financial plan, increases the debt by, a significant amount. If plan A is 23 million, for me, I need to know what plan B or C might look like. And we have not explored that.
Is that a 2025 impact? I forget.
It's not currently. I don't
Well,
know.
I think there's 2 million in there.
Oh.
There is within the scope for acquisition of a site, not for building. In response to that, I think, and this is something that we've talked about a little bit before, but you got to eliminate all of your possibilities that are out there to know really what you're backing into. Now, Barrientos, that study came about because we have a fiscal problem. And I'll just speak for myself. You know, when coming in here, that facility is a fiscal problem because of the fact that it's antiquated. It doesn't do what you need to do. And in order to get a better efficiency with it, you need to do something else. It's also a fiscal issue for me because it's a liability. In terms of how our employees work, and it's not conducive to that. So that is what came about with UWM providing their analysis and then bringing forth, you know, a review of the last 7 or 8 studies we've done over the last 20 years. So that
We all agree
that's what led
something needs to
that.
be done.
Mhm.
We
Right.
need to move on from that.
So when
The-
Barrientos did do his report, he did look at, and I'm not trying to argue any of these points, but I do, like, we did look at that site, and that's not lost, I think, on anyone who's looking at other property. Because I fully anticipate needing to respond to that question as well as, well, what would it be different if you've moved off? What's that cost benefit? The reason why we're going forward and looking into all of them is because I can't give you those answers unless I know what those options are. And then it becomes a desktop analysis on how
Well,
that
so we
works.
need to know what the options are for the current site.
So in his study, he evaluated what could stay on that site absent the transfer station being present there. And that's why the need to look for additional real estate is still a valid
Right.
issue. It
I
doesn't
agree.
work for those modern, it doesn't work to provide the conducive work environment. It's a very tight fit. But
Right.
we did, you know, we did analyze that and have concept numbers to it. So those details are all still important. I anticipate we'll be back having those discussions. Those are all on the table because really until we see all of those pieces out there, I think you won't be in a position to make the most informed, best decision that you can. So
Right.
I'm just
And so
trying to
that's
get
why
those
I
pieces for
question,
you.
I question the 2026 edition of the 23 million.
Mhm.
And even the 2 million for 25.
Valid questions. I'm just not there yet, right? We
And-
just started working with a real estate person and, you know, we said we're going to be back at this, talking again with you at the board in November, but that's where we're at.
Another question, what difference does it make looking at the parking utility option, the transfer of funds, the one-time transfer of funds? What difference does it make if we go forward with a development on that site?
On which site? The North Oakland lot?
On, let's say, any parking lot. Let's say it was the north one. That's my personal favorite. What difference does it make if we're looking at possibly going forward with affordable housing on a parking lot? What difference does it make then if we're taking money out of this fund? Does
So-
it become less of an issue? It seems to me, if you have one less parking lot, you need less money.
No, you're absolutely correct. So I think like really for the first time in the village's history, you know, when the parking utility started, we wanted to get funds, save funds in there for the purposes of buying additional land to create parking. Whereas now the whole concept of that has changed because of the really good work that the community has done, right? So there's been some discussion, whether it's right or wrong is completely up to the village board. But if that site is receptive to redevelopment and the village board agrees that it's in the best interest of the development for the community, you would then eliminate that asset. So when we talk about the parking utility funds and the remaining balance that's in their account, really it's looking to, you know, those funds are to be used for maintenance and potentially reconstruction of whatever parking lots you do have and use for that parking permit, which essentially would take, I mean, if you redeveloped the two that are on North and South Oakland, it leaves you with River Park because that's the one being most heavily permitted, right? That's our main 24-hour lot. It's the one that usually has the longest wait list for it because of overnight parking. So I can't find a record of when River Park was last redone. I know that we repaved Lot C because of the fact that we were doing snow storage there. But I haven't seen any estimate in terms of like what it would take to reconstruct that lot. So really, if you keep the money in that parking utility fund, you would then hypothetically reserve it for the future maintenance and improvements of the lots you continue to keep. If not, though, that maintenance and reconstruction of a lot cost, if you eliminated the utility and drained the fund, then that would just come over to your capital budget at a future point in time. It is, though, there's a portion of, the parking utility that does pay for snow removal. It funds a fourth of your CSOs and some, expense in the clerk's office for salaries because they perform administration on behalf of the utility. So then that would, in the future, need to get reallocated. But again,
Isn't
it's not
that
just a
pretty-
one-time
We've
expenditure.
kind of streamlined that with technology, right? People buy them online.
They do, the parking utility does fund a portion of that. The technology is not free, right? So there's software that we purchase an expense that we have on that side, but it does make it by far less staff intensive from a time standpoint.
And so then I just want to be sure I understand under the delay capital, I'm in favor of delaying capital equipment purchases and coming up with a different policy. I do think the green thing to do is drive your vehicles longer. I understand there's a downside. You just boost your reserves a little more, but I want to make sure that I understand. We've got 909,000 in requests, but the critical things are a gator.
No,
It says gator.
that's
Yeah.
not my understanding
So-
of what's on there.
Yeah,
The Gator Police Department security cameras, is that in the station?
That is in the station, and it's something that they legally and statutorily are required to have. There are systems at end of life, so you'd see a request this year as well as next year. They were able to split it up into 2 phases. So the Verkada system is for 8 cameras within the building.
Okay, so for capital projects, 400 category, 162,000 is what staff has determined is critical, right? Out of that 909.
on
That's
page
right.
4.
Okay.
It's my next question as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, I'm not on the same.
Okay, so on page 4, under delay capital equipment purchases and establish capital equipment,
Mhm.
there's $906,000, $906,600 set aside
Mhm.
and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, right? Set aside in the 2025 budget for capital equipment. And we
Right
also
now.
set aside the additional $100,000 that was requested
It's in
for
here.
so it's
Yes.
in the budget, so it's part of our
Correct.
overall running deficit.
Yes, and you can see this information starting on the details,
Yep.
starting on page 55,
Thank
Okay.
you. That's what I was looking
rolling
for.
up into the summary for the capital projects fund, starting on page 53.
So I guess my question is, and maybe this is part of trustee Stokebrand's questions as well. If the items that are listed on page 4 of the summary are in fact the Gator, the PD security cameras, APS signals, EAB removal, Maryland mill and overlay. Those are the critical
Oh.
items that have been recognized for $162,000?
Mhm.
So if we took out, again, this is monopoly money in the meeting right now.
Right.
If we took out the request of $1,006,600, if we took out and only spent on the critical items, that would leave us with 744,000 some odd dollars. Is that all?
Whatever that math works out to be, yeah, I just don't have.
Right? Like,
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm still, I mean.
but this is a separate fund, so if you're thinking this affects your general fund, it doesn't.
Well, that's not fun.
You really thought you had something.
I was looking, I'm looking at
I
somebody
knew I
trying
was
to figure
bursting your
something
bubble
out.
with that
Okay, but
one.
trustee Kudo, to your point, I
Yeah.
think some of the questions that you guys have been asking, so this, if I were to have put this together for you, right, you've come from the perspective of give it to me all, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I'll tell you
Mhm.
what we don't. I mean, there are a number of things up here that have never even hit a discussion point before I cite them against purposes of budget. And so like, it's asking ourselves the question, like, is this the appropriate fix? Can we do it in a different way? How can that be programmed in? I mean, we have a 280,000 generator for the PD that was cut out of the initial, construction project for the PD
Mhm.
came in with capital budget requests. We don't have that programmed anywhere in our capital budget policy. If we're right or wrong, not arguing for that,
No.
right? Is there, another one, the 70,000 to replace the steps outside the PD, also taken out of the construction or renovation of that building, now poses an issue. They have an additional squad in addition to the entire fleet. Nowhere was I looking to entertain increasing our fleet size. So there are some things that, again, you can make the argument. I'm not trying to say that they're right or wrong,
Mhm.
but they're truly just policy decisions. And so until this board sits down and takes a hard look at where their policy decisions are, I can't reposition on any annual basis
Mhm.
for stuff that dollars that large. I mean, it's just, we don't have that capacity within the scope of the budget. I would suggest we stop having those types of discussions and get more serious about what can we fund? What do we need to fund? What are we going to
Right.
agree to fund? Because ideally, I think as we move forward with the capital budget over time, I'd like to see capital equipment funded a portion on an annual basis to be recouping the cost to be ready for deployment. Right now, and communities do it different ways, right? We've been in a pattern of saying, oh, we need a $280,000 truck and we're going to buy it in 1 year versus saying, we're going to put this on a schedule for 8 years. We're going to budget a certain amount for our
Right.
capital and store, but it makes everyone then get very committed to what you're going to fund, which I think provides greater predictability for the department head, greater predictability from the board. It also allows you to adjust based on market fluctuation. I mean, we just saw garbage trucks come in at
Too much.
correct. So, and that's no one's fault. It's just over the course of time. But I think, one of the things we know about our business here is that this group changes. I mean, meaning the board, right? And I would like for this group to stay working together forever, but that's not.
Remotely possible.
So does the staff. So does the staff.
But I mean, so, again, this is all to say that.
Yeah.
And we've all said this many times, everything is up for grabs, right? Like.
Right. Would we want to do all of these things? Yes.
Sure.
Right.
We don't have the
But
money.
so, I think the review of that capital policy does is it allows us all to weigh in, and instead of providing kind of like knee-jerk reactions when we get to budget time, to have those conversations leading up to it so that we're planning. And so that by the time we get here, there shouldn't really be any surprises.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only difference is this is the first time we've been dealing with major structural deficit budgeting.
Absolutely.
As opposed to,
Yeah.
inherent surpluses or
Sure.
inherited surpluses. So, for at least this budget and probably for the next couple,
Hmm.
I imagine we'll be going through with a little bit finer tooth comb, line by line of,
Mhm.
can we do this? Can we not do this? Does this make sense?
Hmm.
Can we put it off? Which led me to this, which
Yeah.
was the 162,000 versus a little over 1 million. What do we really need? When do we really need it?
Hmm.
But I would be, just because there seems to be some difference of opinion, I would be interested to know if those items that are listed on page 4, the Gator security cameras and all that, are the 162,000, or if
They are.
they're,
My
They are.
understanding
So
is yes.
okay,
Items noted as number 1 in the priority rating on pages 55 to 56 in red add
Yep.
up to the 162.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay,
One
And-
being the most critical.
Yes, that's, yes.
and a new,
A new
And-
Gator is most critical.
In this case, it is.
Sorry to look.
Yeah,
at
I
you.
don't know that we need to
don't
question
recall
them,
the
right?
If you
Details?
ask this question,
I just,
every department head will say that their items are the most critical.
yeah.
There's a varying degree, but there's also a portion of being responsible, which is you can't just go in with nothing, right?
Sure.
Because things are going to break and you're not going to know. It happens, right? So that's why you can delay, but then like we would be back at this policy in January. I mean, because we would want to be going through our due diligence to take that. You're calling it a detailed look, someone's calling it something else. So you guys are getting really acquainted to what's in here. And that we're, looking at the facts of these great sheets that Dan puts together each year. You know, that's our capital asset list, which is pretty much our vehicles, and then go forward from there.
So I know for 2 years, we had, I think it was a number 2 level priority, it was capital drive painting. And I don't see it here at all, but I see these signals and that's a grant. I guess I'm curious, is there a match that we have to come up with for the grant, the APS signals?
The portion that you see in there is the match.
Okay. But the capital drive painting, I don't see at all. And that's been listed for a couple of years and you can hardly see the paint on Capitol Drive. So that's a huge concern that is not even listed. And I don't understand the village-wide initiatives under the board. I don't understand what those are. $10,000 for, is that a technology?
Those
Oh,
are
that is
IT.
Technology.
Pardon?
That is technology.
And why is it under the village-wide village board?
It's under the village manager's office.
Yeah,
guess,
I just think in
quarterly, so
on the chart that you guys had, it came up under the village
Yeah.
board and not the village manager.
It
So
should be
those
under village
would be moved
manager.
down.
Mhm.
So, I'd love to see if I have to, I would propose capital, bike and pedestrian safety for village-wide initiatives for the village board. Can we get some painting on Capitol Drive?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't respond to that at this time. That would be something that I'd wanna, Leanne just let me know that the Capitol Drive marking's not listed because it's a part of the 2025 initiative and reviewing our capital or our pavement marking process for not only Capitol, but other roadways.
And what
Which
does
is
that mean?
Scheduled for April.
So that means we would have no new paint on Capitol Drive until 2026 is unacceptable.
Ask a
Did
question.
you want to?
Oh, no, I was gonna say, can I ask a different? I don't want to interrupt you.
Done.
If you're waiting for an
Yeah,
answer.
No, I don't think there is one.
Would it be fair for me to say that the meeting on October 7th? Because now we're asking individual questions about individual departments. That's probably, and I would love to get into it right now, but it's not the time or place. October 7th, when department heads are in, we're going over fund by fund.
Mhm.
That would be a more appropriate time to sort of sit down with these line items and say, is Gator number one?
Correct.
Are stairs at PD number two?
Correct.
Okay.
So
So-
in that process, we'll go through, we'll give you a list in order and we'll allocate 15 minutes. You can ask anything about the operational budget. And then, it's typical that we either go through capital all at once.
Yeah.
Or, you guys can also break it up and ask those departments when they're there.
Because again, I'm getting the sense that based on the questions we're asking tonight, like,
Right. So department heads were not requested to be in person to address that. The October 7th meeting is built in exactly for that purpose.
right.
And that would be that deeper dive.
Again, I'm just confirming that
Yep.
that's,
Absolutely.
that's when we can do that.
Mhm.
It's not tonight, even though, but you probably shouldn't have every fund memorized. So,
Mhm.
Come on.
yeah, you can't ask you.
But to clarify, is then October 7th too late to make decisions about delaying purchases or?
On October 7th, you're going to have, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead of you, but on October 7th, you'll have your, the poll question,
Oh,
period
right.
concluded. And if you can give us that direction on October 2nd. The last date you can give us direction is October 14th.
Okay, great. That's what I was worried about in
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of, yeah.
Yep. So October 14th, there's no agenda. It's identified in your schedule as a cow if needed. And yes, it would be a cow fully on budget.
Is seventh cow or is it just fine? Department?
Cow.
And so how would we get a plan to go forward with a 4% property tax level increase? You just say we come up with an extra $200,000 in ideas for revenue or cuts? Or could we ask staff to come up with ideas for cuts? That would probably be the most wisest thing to compare 6 and 4.
I mean, maybe to save time, we have to poll the board to see what the tolerance is. I mean, because we'd hate to have to put everybody to work for 4% if everybody here is in for a 6%.
If I could ask a couple clarifying questions, then it might be easier to get to that question. But you can also, I have a couple questions about where we landed based on what trustee Kudo was asking and also trustee Stokebrand, but why don't we just close out what does it take to get to 4%? We'd have to come up with 240,000
Yeah,
to reduce the budget by.
approximately.
It could be a combination of cuts or revenue.
That's right.
Mhm.
It could be cuts or revenue.
And so if we decide to do, is there any way to have possible projections to compare instead of just one thing to compare for such a big decision? I would rather have a couple things to look at than just one. So it would be helpful to have an idea of what a 4% tax levy increase would look like versus a 6% tax levy look like.
Definitely. If requested, we could prepare an alternate view of the general fund for the next discussion.
I would appreciate it.
So I think I just answered my own question. I was going back to the Kudo math, the Kudo formula. The reason why the 4 or 6% would only impact the general fund
Mhm.
revenue and expenditures, because the 900,000 capital that's in here, even if we reduce that by 700,000, we would still have the same need. We would still have the same revenue and expenditures on the general fund side.
That's correct.
Got it. So, okay, that was my question.
Mhm.
So, actually, I have other questions.
Just one more question for me as well. Do the salaries in this chart are they represented with the increases?
That is correct.
That's correct. All the salaries in here
All the salaries
have been
are
represented with the
included
increase.
up to the maximum increases that we
Okay.
did in the salary study.
Thank you.
So it seems like again, Kudo budgeting 101, at a large picture,
Do not go down that route.
the survey, just to be completely honest, the salary increase is that 2% between 4 to 6% levy increase. That's one way of looking
Generally,
at it.
yes.
It's
The
generally,
extra, yes. Mhm.
okay. So can I ask a question? Are you done? So the capital deferred, if we took out things from the capital requests, we would see that improve our budget in what area, and how would that impact what levers we
Currently,
need to
the
pull?
capital requests are in there at much greater than what we could fund.
Right.
And
Oh, so it's just conceptual at this point.
it is just
It's not,
conceptual.
it's not being shown on a bottom line anywhere.
That's right.
Okay, got it.
So if you want to fund more than the 162, we're going to have some.
We're
additional-
adding to
you're
our
adding to your profit
deficit. Yeah.
deficit.
Okay.
Oh, I thought the 160, I thought the 1,000,006 was in there already.
It is not covered by financing. It's in there as a cost, which we then have to cover with financing.
Okay,
So currently, we have $234,000 going into the capital projects fund
right.
from from one of the levers that we're pulling, the finance. But other than that, besides what you would put in there from transfers from the general fund, we're not financing anything
Okay.
directly. So the 234 is related to the vehicle registration fee, which we would collect on a yearly basis, transfer into capital projects, and it would be used to offset what we need to levy elsewhere.
So we're really only at like a $7,000 difference.
That's right.
But I thought, is that legal? I thought it had to go specifically for transportation costs. The
In our-
vehicle registration fee? Can
In
we
our-
legally move that for capital?
In our capital fund, we also have portions that you'll see move out to go paying for bond payments. So related for road projects that we do, things of that nature.
Mhm.
So transportation costs can mean roads.
Correct. It
You
just
must
doesn't
adjust
come up,
roads.
like, we're not identifying,
Those specific expenses, because it
Correct.
would end up being like a transfer used for debt service purposes.
Mhm.
Conceptually, we
the-
want you to see it's offsetting.
Right.
Mhm.
It's an offset rather than
Mhm.
a
That's right.
increased revenue.
And then in addition to the $900,000 request, we have the $100,000,
Yeah, for
you know, for saving for the future
Mhm.
or for one-offs.
emergencies, yeah.
Mhm.
And that is part of the 162 or
Mhm.
that's,
It's not.
it's not, okay.
And the
then
ARPA money is gone.
I
at the end of
really do have
24.
questions.
And
Yes.
I just want to say we've got 10 minutes.
I know, but I
And-
haven't asked any questions.
Right.
They're literally different than anyone. I think, or they could be clarifying and I just wasn't paying attention, but do you have another question? I'm sorry to get, I'm also hungry, but
I'm just saying we have one more.
what is the item?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, I can ask these questions a little later date. No problem.
We can
Nope.
also take.
I
the
don't know
poll
what's
under
sharing either,
business.
so take it
I
back.
am happy to
Say-
answer your questions.
Yeah, I would just say
after.
focus on the questions that you have and let's keep
Mhm.
going through those.
They're
All
important.
right. So if we eliminated the parking utility, we'd essentially be absorbing the 0.25 salary component of
That's
three
right.
positions.
It was just allocated out, so it would end up going in the general fund.
So it's like adding 0.75 FTE or something.
That's right.
So that then is general fund, which then is tax levy. So
Right.
we kind of,
And the future of the parking lots
right.
will be financed that way as well.
So it could be, yeah, a little short-sighted that way. And then, okay, capital for, sorry, I was just making notes, so I'm not trying to stall here. Service, oh, the service levels discussion we're gonna have in 2025. The so the refuse and recycling charge potential, does it make sense to wait till we have a service level discussion? Or do you think, I mean, we're never gonna not have a refuse and recycling
Definitely.
cost.
Right.
So it's pretty safe. If we pulled that lever this year, it's not like we would turn around and not need it or something.
Exactly.
Okay. And then I think that's all for now. So, oh, and the $2 million that's in the LRP for a potential site for Public Works facility, that is not financed unless it's actually spent, correct?
That's
Okay.
right. Placeholder right now.
Placeholder. That concludes my questions.
So would we be raising taxes for that 2 million in 25?
Because
Because it's in the long-range financial plan for a 2025 expenditure.
It is
You haven't borrowed
to be
for it yet.
financed, yeah.
It's
only
because
once
it's a
you
finance cost. So if you finance it, then yes. If you don't, then no.
And so the ARPA money will be gone by the end of this calendar year, correct?
We're going to be required by law to allocate it
Mhm.
by the end of this year.
But
There's not much left.
allocate, but not necessarily spend.
But I'm gonna
At least allocate and spend by the end of 2025, I think.
mhm.
Right. Thank you.
Who's chairing? Oh, how'd that happen? I wasn't here to convene. Okay,
Jim started the meeting, but
all right,
Public safety chair.
okay. Jim's very understated tonight. Okay, so anyway, let's move on to the poll discussion.
I think it's a good
You
idea.
want to come?
Mhm.
You want to come
Thank
up
you
and-
for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No,
Look forward to October.
Okay. Go to the preview. So, yeah, I need to share this on there, pardon.
We can just also say, did everybody have a chance to review this?
Yep.
In advance?
Yes.
Okay. And
Okay.
And this
Other
is for
community
discussion and then it's on the agenda for
Is that
action.
correct? So briefly, you all saw in the packet, the poll that was put together. Really wanted to try to make it as streamlined as possible so that as folks get started on it, they know that their opinion is being asked for very early on. So what we're looking for, again, giving a little bit of information here as I toggle through, since it does look a little bit different when the user will actually access it versus what's in the packet. We included all of those one-pagers, so the link to the materials goes directly to that webpage that we've created that we're driving everybody toward. So we invite people to review those materials before they go next, where they'd actually rank their choice as far as what first choice, second choice, and so forth would be. So this is just, again, how this looks in a nutshell. As I toggle through, I have to respond to all of them. This will be quick. I'm just making sure I have one for each.
Now we know where your priorities are.
I know, man.
He's trying to make a straight diagonal.
So each of these sections do provide the opportunity for a comment field. So if somebody does have something they want to say about the levy increases, if they select yes, then it would of course open up the comment field for them to provide those comments. So I'll just type in a little something. If they don't have comments, say on the next one, it would just toggle them through to the next category. So it would just be really, really quick. They can go all the way through. There's my comment for that. And then I'm just going to say no all the way through. So as we go through, and we do, of course, have the at the very bottom, the status page, if you can, or the status of the survey. This again, I know that we've had some conversation about that we received from trustees regarding this question specifically. So of course, we stand ready to either talk about that now or perhaps during the regular board meeting again about the parking meters. Just to go really quickly, I'll just I don't want to answer anything. There we go. So
Can
that
you
would
go
be the
back
very last
without
thing.
submitting? Can you go back real quick
Surely.
to when you were asking, like one more? When you're asking the questions about each for, if you have a question, do you have a comment?
Mhm.
Is there just a little bit more context that you could put on this page? I know we have the link to the materials, but is there just a little more color that we can add to each of these questions here? Without making it too long, but could you add just kind of a couple sentences to a short paragraph about what each of these is?
It was a delicate balance even before we arrived at this iteration where I embedded initially the sections of the PSAs in addition to the one pagers. So we were really just trying to make it a little pare it down a bit. So I wonder maybe there's a way we could play with it to just, like you said.
I just feel like maybe some people are just going to be confused about what it is, about.
If people are lazy and don't think, I don't have time to click on those links and they're just going to think, I'm just going to go through and what I can do, quick hit. That's why recycling refuse charge, you might as well put in there proposed $153 a year. Vehicle registration fee proposed $30 a year.
Sure.
Just
Take those
boom.
quick hits off the one sheet.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely put if you've got the numbers that are proposed, put it in there proposed for people who won't take the time to click. And I think we definitely need a separate levy increase one that has 2, 4, 6, 8.
Everybody's going to go for 2.
Of course, but I mean, some people, I think it could be you could get meaningful
Not
responses.
necessarily, yeah.
If you're gonna do that, then I would highly recommend you put in what the average annual increase is per $350,000 home. Works to,
With it. Mhm.
yeah.
We could use that graph. Yeah. No, I think that's.
Just so
great
people have an
suggestions, Really
idea.
good feedback. It's tough because I want to think that people are going to read, but what we learned through all of it, the quicker we can give them the information to respond.
And I think you could ask a services, question.
I think we
Would-
have asked that question, haven't we?
In
Would
23, we
I mean,
did.
we just had a whole thing about it. We just did a whole giant survey about it. And there was pretty much resounding feedback.
About like
Service
library,
levels in
levels.
the 2023 community survey.
did we propose like, let's say reducing library hours on a Sunday or something? That's what I mean.
I vote no.
Well, we wouldn't, that's not for a 2025 impact. We're really
But it would
focused
be,
on-
if you're going to do this, it'd be a good time to look for, if someone says, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought, well, it's in the survey. Library hours were reduced, village hall hours, right, this year for 10% on Friday or for the week.
We
Uh,
could also say respond to those types of questions with, we're going to take on service levels next year because to.
And then we'll do
diligence-
another survey. I'd say do it while you're here.
I mean, I think that if you ask the questions and you overwhelmingly get a negative, not a negative, but a response of 2%, and I'm not willing to pay this, I'm not willing to pay that, then you can infer that they hopefully they understand that there are budget cuts and service cuts that are associated with those things. I think if you came back with the survey results and it was no, 2%, no, and they recognize that we won't have the money that we would need for operating, then I think it's fair to assume that there would be cuts. I do have a question about timing. So when would this go, if it passes this evening, when does it go live and when do you close it? And when do we get to see the data?
Yep. After the discussion tonight, once we have the consensus, the idea was to go live tomorrow, the 17th. It would be open till the 30th, and then it would be available for the first meeting in October.
Do that meeting
October
packet the
7th.
Thursday before the.
Correct.
So we would get it
By the 3rd or so. Is that Thursday the 3rd?
by the 3rd,
Mhm.
so that we have it in the packet for the meeting on the
Correct.
7th. Safe to assume that all regular levels of communication regarding this will go out, the manager's memo, so on and so forth.
Correct. Postcards as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just submitted a proposed edit for the parking meter one. Adding a sentence, provide some additional text. Quote would follow the first sentence. Quote, at the time, staff's preliminary estimate was that metered parking could generate $200,000 annual revenue. Quoting what had been previously presented to the board. And noting it was a preliminary estimate that may not reflect the ultimate reality, but I thought providing some context would be helpful.
And we're not asking names or addresses. So theoretically, this could get out to somebody and, some people from around different communities could just apply to this. Not like they're going to want to, but
If they have literally nothing better to do with their
Yeah.
time.
Or
they
somebody could fill it out 50 times.
So it seems like there should be some sort of an algorithm that would somehow be able to bring some more integrity to the process.
What do you mean?
Like that it would be able to say, oh, I've already gotten one from that person. I'm not going to take that. You know what I'm saying?
Google Forms has a way that you can do that, but it has them register, and I believe that it's only tied to Gmails. So we'll be limiting our ability to collect survey responses, excuse me.
Yeah, you'd have to use a different mechanism than Google to do it. It would cost money, it would take more time, and you may not get all the data back in a usable, friendly Excel spreadsheet that they could then aggregate all the information and get it to us by the 3rd for our meeting on the 7th. Not that I've ever done this before, but
It's not scientific, but I'll tell you, this weekend had the opportunity to be at the farmer's market and 4 people unsolicited said, we're ready to take the survey on the 17th. Thank you. And they're like, we want to give our input. Right? No, it was not
Okay.
from Arthur,
double check.
not from Arthur.
Arthur, Matt, and
me.
Yeah. was it-
Yeah, but because they said you need to hear, like, we're happy we get the opportunity to weigh in. Like this is a lot. There's a lot on the plate. So I can see us using the polls. They've been effective in the past. And really it's to give you an indication.
if we keep those same postcards that you handed out, are those are the postcards that will be then used for?
That's correct.
QR
That's-
code will be this.
Those will be
survey.
going out. That's right.
So, we can still have them on our table at the farmer's market and people can
Absolutely.
pick them up and look at them. Okay.
Because it also drives you to the site where you're gonna see, the outline of those activities and really that site's gonna be maintained, right? So once we close the 2025 budget next year, people will be able to see exactly what you've done, right? So then in 2026, we're gonna build another page. Because the subject matter is gonna go on for 15, 20 years. I mean, the projects that you're bonding for are that long. So I think it's important for people to understand, the record and how decisions get made, because I think what you're trying to do is the best you possibly can any given year.
Do
Are
we
there
intend to
any-
do another survey next year? Is that what you're saying? On the budget? No.
I don't know. We haven't gotten, I
Oh,
haven't thought about that.
I misunderstood.
Focusing,
But we're gonna see how it goes this year.
are there any more discussion points that need to be addressed here in Cal in advance of taking action later this evening during the business meeting?
Mm-mm.
If not, then I would ask for a motion,
Adjourn.
move to adjourn.
So moved. Second. Sorry.
All right, any objections? We stand adjourned
Sorry about that.
at 7:34 PM. We can take a 5-minute break, bio break. And then we'll convene.
I got it. Thank you.
Maybe I'll look around the corner.
Yeah, there might be some in there. If not, Chris has something.
Memorable.
And some,
Thank you. For, let me know about my charger.
I know.
Airport, to be clear. Oh, okay, all right, well, come on. Expectations.
Huh?
Huh?
I love it. What do I need to do to earn it? Perfect. And they keep coming.
Honestly, I have never,
No, they're awesome.
like, every time. Super helpful.
Yeah. And they keep recruiting people.
Could be worse.
It could be worse.
There are.
Yeah.
I'm sure you hear horror stories of.
Yeah.
We don't have any.
They don't have any, and I feel bad, but kind of not really.
I remember in 2004.
I would like to call the meeting of the village board to order at 7:42. Has this meeting been publicly noticed?
The meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law.
All right, thank you very much. All trustees are present. We have trustee Lynn joining virtually. I'd like to thank everyone for their time, talent, and patience in advance as we conduct business this evening. We have several special orders of business this evening. 4A, the semi-annual police department report is a presentation. Chief Worth. And I apologize in advance. I'm just going to be eating some dinner, so I'm not as crabby.
Are you sharing?
Anyone's welcome to.
Good evening, everybody. Have you all had an opportunity to review the report?
Yes.
So I just have a couple of highlights that I'd like to emphasize from the report. And many of you attended our Citizens Academy.
Want me to pull it up? Is
Sure.
it like in a,
If you want to.
okay, well, it's up to you.
Yeah.
I'll defer to you.
Yeah, I have it here. They'll have it, but if the public wants to see it, you can pull it up. Thank you. So many of you attended the Citizens Academy in the fall and were able to see that we rewrote our mission, vision, and core values. And that was a labor of love and one that took a great deal of time, research, and input from my staff. But I think that we came up with a really great mission, vision, and core values, one that is completely representative of who we are, what we stand for, and what we believe in as a police department, hence the acronym SHPD COP. A couple other things that we have done this year. We have continued to emphasize training, specifically training on in career and professional development, but training that that helps grow our people in de-escalation, professional communications, search and seizure investigations, and the like, things that will really bring value to our police department. The other thing that we've sought is to
have our officers trained in many of the unified tactics. So emergency vehicle operations, defense and arrest tactics, firearms, vehicle contacts, professional communications. And we now have 2 officers trained in officer wellness as well. That way we can conduct our own in-house training and do little snippets of training rather than the blocks. We're required by law to have 24 hours, and that's the minimum, 24 hours of continuing education every year to maintain our certification. We've advanced our technology some, and we've launched a couple of communication platforms. One of them is an in-house. We have a screen in our assembly that broadcasts messaging, and our computer-aided dispatch calls for service, promotes Facebook, promotes training, and any other messaging that we need to get out so that everybody has an opportunity to see it on a rotating picture. We also have a phone app. I hope that you have it all downloaded. We have 593 registered users, and of course, we'd like to have much more than that, but that gives our community an opportunity to communicate with us and provide tips. It doesn't replace our 911 or non-emergency services, but it is an arena for individuals or our community to have contact with us. As I mentioned, in March, we held our first Citizens Academy. And we're looking to our Spring Citizens Academy. We're looking to continue that as long as we have enough attendees. 8's the minimum. We have one scheduled to start on Thursday if we get some additional attendees, but we will continue that at least once or twice a year as long as there's interest. And I think there's really value to bring our community in and showcase what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and our support in the community, and hopefully the return support. We reviewed and revised all of our position responsibilities subordinate to my position. And we did so we could more accurately reflect not just what the officers do or what the staff does, but what our expectations as leadership is of them. What was important with that is they all had input into what they'd like to see into their position responsibilities. And we know that as the years have gone by, and certainly since my assignment here in Shorewood, those positions have evolved and we've taken on more responsibilities. So it more accurately reflects that. I've been in the process of reviewing all of our policies. To date, I've reviewed and either revised or rewritten 45 policies, which is very labor intensive as well. So it's still a work in progress, but important, and we're required to update them or at least review them every 2 years. And then the launch of our voluntary physical fitness standard, which was subsequently adopted by the village. So it's staff and the village staff can participate in entrance standards set by the Department of Justice for law enforcement. And if they successfully complete those entrance standards, they get a day off. And then the village adopted that as well, but also can apply it to the wellness scorecard for health insurance benefits. As I mentioned, we have 2 officers trained in officer wellness, and it's something that we're trying to place an emphasis on, knowing that we have to be physically fit to do our jobs. And that's something that I'm really proud to have introduced to our department. If you want to go, are there any questions about what I've talked about so far? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the statistics.
When you change a policy, does that go through the police commission?
It does not.
You have somebody that monitors your app 24/7, or who gets, like, if somebody's not interacting with the app, who gets that information?
So there are a number of administrators for the app, myself included, Captain Robleski and Captain Santiago. So we get an alert on our phone via email, and we can log in then to the app. And depending on the nature of the communication, assign it or defer it or whatever may potentially need to be done, whether there's additional follow-up or just simple contact with the individual who signed into the app.
This, did you get to, it says fully staffed. I thought you had an opening for a detective. We have not made a decision. Is that true?
By person wise, we are fully staffed. We have not yet, because we hired, well, most recently, we hired Officer Brown and Officer Genesee into the police officer positions. They are both on they are both on probation. So we have not made a determination yet about whether or not we're going to fill the detective's position. And we're actually, with some injuries that we have, we're not in position to fill it now and take those uniformed personnel off the street for calls for service.
So if you decide to hire that detective position at some point,
It wouldn't be a hire, it would be an internal promotion.
and would that come before the board or?
The promotion,
The decision to fill that position? Because I know that was something that the Weiss report did not recommend. They actually I believe he recommended we not have to.
right, so the request for me to maintain the 2 detectives position came in front of the board once already, came in front of public safety and then the board. And it was approved for me to maintain the 2 detectives positions.
But they've not been. There's just been one since I believe.
Correct. Well, since the retirement of Gary,
Right.
there's only been one. Right.
What you're saying is that you wouldn't have to come back because it's an internal and the positions have been maintained by a vote of the board.
Correct. Okay. Any additional questions? Okay, I'm going to move on to the statistics then. So calls for service are pretty steady. We're 3rd in the North Shore behind Glendale and Brown Deer. And our calls for service are just what you would expect, our calls for service. We're maintaining a fairly, next slide. Oh, yep. So we're not seeing this year the major fluctuations that we typically get in the summertime. So we're fairly static, averaging over 900 calls a month. Next slide. And then our municipal ordinance and traffic citations year to date. We've seen a slight decrease from 2023, where we were aided with the Capital Drive initiative. And that's why there's such a spike in 2023. We're at exactly where I want us to be. 2 of our higher performer officers in traffic stops have been on limited duty status. So that's taken away from some of our initiative in traffic stops. And then, but we're fairly static, and I'm pleased with the work that we're doing in traffic stops. Next slide. As you can see, our theft numbers are really driving what our crime numbers are, and our theft encompasses retail thefts and all other types of thefts. So thefts of packages, entries into motor vehicles where an item was taken. That's all calculated under the theft category. We've seen retail thefts at Metro Market decline, and we want to give them credit in part for some of the things that they've undertaken to improve or mitigate some of the retail theft. We've seen retail theft at Walgreens spike significantly. Captain Robleski and I have a meeting with them next week, and hopefully we can leverage them to make some changes or some other types of corrections so we can mitigate some of these thefts from Walgreens. One of the things that we've seen is an increased shopping rate at Walgreens as well. In the area, a number of Walgreens have closed. So it's one of the nearest Walgreens to the area.
Can you just briefly describe for us what items folks are, like, what are they stealing from Walgreens?
Yeah, what we're seeing a lot of items taken is personal hygiene and cleaning items. And what we're hearing, at least anecdotally, is those items are either being used or traded in exchange for illegal narcotics.
And are people just walking through the buzzer system? Buzzer goes off, somebody just walks away with it and nobody does anything?
Well, they occasionally will step outside just to see the direction that they've traveled and then call us.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's no active attempt to stop them. And I'm not sure that I would recommend
Right.
that anyway.
You don't know if they're armed, right?
Correct, right. Yeah, we don't want to put any employees at risk, especially if somebody's violent. We've seen a slight increase in motor vehicle thefts as well. And I know that Captain Santiago made a notation here on the crime comparison by year that if we continue trending at the same rate, we'll be up 25% in thefts and a 15% overall increase. One of the things that we've seen with motor vehicle thefts is there are juveniles, and motor vehicle thefts is up across the county. Milwaukee, I think the latest statistic was up 22%, might even be a little bit higher than that, but we're seeing groups of juveniles come in and attempt or complete the act of stealing motor vehicles. And within the last month, we've actually been really fortunate to catch a number of these individuals. But what we're seeing is there are patterns of juveniles who have multiple arrests for these type of offenses and that are in the criminal justice system. And once they leave our station, they go into the criminal justice system and it's out of our hands.
Fair to say that these are nonviolent motor vehicle thefts. They're just stealing cars as opposed to carjacking someone.
Yes, fortunately,
Right. Yeah. I'm
yes,
just looking at the data.
yes.
Another question just about that trend. I mean, it seems like it's been going on for several years. Is
Mhm.
it consistent with previous years in terms of the car thefts, or is it uniquely high right now?
Well, across the county, it sort of has ebbed and flowed depending on what types of enforcement is thrown at this problem. And I don't mean to say like thrown at this problem, but I mean, in Milwaukee, there are carjacking task forces, increased patrol opportunities, those types of things. So it ebbs and flows. And then as we see more kids entering into the criminal justice system or exiting the criminal justice system, fluctuates.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any particular questions on, I know President McCaig had a question about parking, about night parking. Any questions about that? You all got the answer to her question? Okay. Use of force incidents have gone down, and that's really attributable to our officers and their de-escalation tactics, their professional communications, and some of the in-house training that we've done. And I'm really, really proud of our officers. Now, you know that we review all body cam, especially for uses of force, and determine if there's any training issues or need for training or whether policy issues or those types of things. But it's something that we talk about quite regularly. One of the other things that we've done is added a TV into our roll call room, and we regularly watch videos that depict use of force incidents or other types of law enforcement specific actions. And during roll calls, after we get out the relevant information, we debrief as a group about those incidents. So we're staying fully abreast of what's happening, what videos are out there, and looking at how do we do what we do, how can we do it better, and those types of things. And we do it, and we have those conversations objectively. Complaints received. We only have one citizen complaint this year, and that investigation was unfounded. It was a failing to investigate complaint, but we found through investigation that the incident was in fact investigated, so it was an unfounded complaint. Our traffic stop data, there's an answer to President McCaig's question in your packet as well. Dominantly, what we're seeing with traffic stop data and is citations being issued for operating without license, operating after suspension, and operating after revocation, as well as vehicle registration offenses. You've read the paper anytime in the last 2 weeks, you would see that there's a push by the city of Milwaukee to close the loophole for operating without license violations. We know at least anecdotally, that there are significant consequences for individuals operating without licenses, whether they're have no license or suspended, and the frequency which with crashes occur, and the injury and property damage that can occur. And that's being promoted quite widely on media. So that's one of the things that we're looking at when we issue citations. Officers still have a discretion about whether to educate or enforce. Any other additional questions specific to the statistics that I can answer? Yes, ma'am.
Have you had any, what's your relationship at this point with the school district and calls and?
We have a meeting upcoming with the school. I know that there are a number of items on the table for us to discuss. We are monitoring the school. We're not seeing a lot of calls for service at the school at this point, but we frequent the area. And both myself and Captain Santiago are in conversations, and Captain Robleski in conversations regularly with Sean about what's going on and how can we be proactive.
What are some of the steps you've seen at Metro Market to prevent theft, and how would you characterize the state of the relationship between the police department and the retailer right now?
Metro Market specifically?
Yeah.
Very good. They have a very robust security team. And we've seen them step up their patrols both on the inside of the store and outside of the store. One of the biggest things that we saw was them moving the liquor department. And there's also a security guard actually stationed at the exterior, the self-scanning. So we have a very good relationship with them. We've increased our business checks there substantially, and at Walgreens. And I know that they're very happy to see us, and we get called there, and but they're happy for us to come in. So our relationship is very good. And we're working on establishing that same kind of relationship at Walgreens as well.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit more about the, in your year 2 to 4 goals, you have the enhanced pedestrian and bike safety. And then I see that the traffic citations is down as well. You mentioned that before, but just if you could just explain more what the police department's planning on doing to enhance bike and pedestrian safety. And, you know, that's probably the main thing that we get emails about that's related to the police department is people are wondering, people say, well, you know, why aren't the police, you know, writing more speeding tickets or, you know, run tickets for stop signs, things like that. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the decision to cite or educate. It's really a fine balance, right? We know that there's a monetary fine that's associated with enforcement. And depending on the circumstances of the violation and depending on the driving record, education and being stopped by the police are sometimes equal to having a monetary fine of that. So it's a balancing act, right? I mean, the other challenge that we have is if we cite every single person that we stop that drives through the village of Shorewood, then it really deteriorates our relationship with the community. So I know the community wants us to cite everybody or stop everybody that commits a violation, but service levels just aren't there for us to do that. And then deteriorating relationships and those types of things. Now, in the year 2 to 4 goals, increase pedestrian and bicyclist safety. I work with Chris and Bart regularly for their master plan. And whenever the Parks and Public Spaces, the Bike and Pedestrian Subcommittee invite me to their meetings, I'm happy to come and listen. But when I say enforcement, I mean from the aspect of presence on the street and not necessarily the actual act of stopping vehicles. But what kind of presence are we creating when we're monitoring crosswalks, especially for school-age children going to school, or Edgewood or Maryland or some of those where detours where we're frequently seeing complaints. So enforcement from the respect that we're providing presence and we do stop cars occasionally for pedestrian violations. But really what we want to message is safe crossing, not just for crosswalks, but bicyclist safety and understanding the rules of the roads and their obligation to adhere to rules of the road, bicyclists to adhere to rules of the road as well.
You do a directed patrol, for example, for pedestrian safety on West Capitol Drive. Does that require overtime or can that be part of a shift? How does it usually work?
Well, last year, our Capitol Drive initiative was done on overtime. The short answer to your question is yes, it would require overtime. For us to balance the initiative and calls for service with the staffing levels that we have currently, it would require overtime. Any other questions?
What's the status of the grants that for targeted enforcement?
For this year? So we're still in the process of, we still have the 3 grants, the OWI, the seatbelt, and the speed, that's right. So I just got an email from Sergeant Gardner who manages those particular grants. So we got notice of the 2025 grants with a decrease in funding, but the decrease is across all the agencies that participate. So as soon as I have that information, I'll bring that back as a communication to the board.
And so that could possibly fund some overtime. Pedestrian. I mean, I know it says OWI seatbelt speeding.
Those are the primary targets for the grants, yes,
But it would give you money.
for speed, OWI, and seatbelt grants.
If they see something else and they're sitting there, though, they can.
Well, yes, we're not going to
enforce.
tell them to ignore something, but it's predominantly for speed, OWI, and seatbelt.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Okay.
No, thank you.
Thank you all very
Eric.
much for your attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the service and please share that with the entire department.
Thank you. I
Really.
will.
Oh, I lied. I totally lied. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The next Citizen Academy, how's it shaping up?
Ah,
We just got
You
the
need-
email that they're not going to be doing it this quarter.
Yeah, we only had 4 attendees.
Were you one
So-
of them?
I did it last year.
Already
Oh, you
did
did
it.
last
Yeah.
year, yeah.
Really good.
A lot of us did it.
So we will have it in the spring again, as long as we get enough attendees. 8 is the minimum.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain.
Good night.
We could send Mr. Kudo out there to be the spokesman because he really got me excited about it.
Not excited enough. have
We could do a video where you
All
just,
right.
you know,
There we go.
Just so you know, we're not done with our meeting.
Trustee Arndorfer and Trustee McGovern, I think, were on Facebook promoting it. So thank you. Appreciate
Really
that.
good.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Item 4B, the North Shore Fire Department budget presentation. So we have, oh, I just realized the resolutions, are they charted for action?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And we're joined now by Caitlin Harrigan, who's the finance director for North Shore Fire Department.
Great. So just to recap where we are in the process for my colleagues. Last week, the North Shore Fire Department Board met. There was a unanimous vote to recommend a 3% increase to the budget. That did not include, the original request was a 3.6% increase, but that included adding a staff person, a full-time staff person. That increase was not something that all communities felt they could fund at this time. So there is going to be some discussion around how to respond to increase in calls, but that'll be a service level discussion that occurs over the next year. And also updating the 5-year strategic plan for the department, which is normal. So the process, and I'll have Ms. Harrigan confirm this process, but what's required now is that that the recommended actions from the fire department board come to each municipality, and it's required that there be unanimous votes for approval of these resolutions in order for the budget to move forward. So the vote of the board was unanimous. It didn't have to be, but coming back, all the votes back to the municipalities and at this point need to be unanimous in order to or the I vote has to, the resolutions need to be passed in all 7 municipalities in order for the budget to move forward. That's the story. But Ms. Harrigan, if you can confirm that and just talk about where we are process-wise, and then a high-level overview. I believe everybody has the information in there in the packet.
Happy to. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. My name is Caitlin Harrigan. I haven't been in front of you in several years. So just to introduce myself, I am the finance director for the North Shore Fire Department. I have been with the fire department for just shy of 8 years now. So I cannot respond to a fire or an EMS call, but I can tell you how much that ladder truck and that engine and the ambulance that is responding costs. So for what it's worth, been here long enough definitely to know that. The chief is traveling tonight a bit, so he just asked if I would be here with you all to talk about some of the things that we considered for our budget for 2025 and to talk to you a little bit about the resolutions that are listed on your agenda this evening. So President McKeag did a really good job, I think, summarizing a lot of the points that we hit. So we have to approve the North Shore Fire Department budget. We usually approve it in September. It has to be approved no later than October 1st, as outlined in our intergovernmental service agreement, so that you all have it as you are preparing to finalize your budgets for the following year. So we get our budget done first, and we start the process a little bit earlier so that we have our information ready for you all and ready to go so that you can continue to move forward and we're not slowing anybody else down in the process. So President McKeag is absolutely right. We've had an increase in call volume the last few years. So we've been talking to our board a little bit about that increase in call volume and about some of the personnel that we might, that we do believe that are necessary to continue to respond appropriately. Some of what we run up against is, while we have an adjustment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while on the levy limit side, we do not have the same adjustment on the expenditure restraint side. So because of that, when different municipalities have a negative net new construction, their real limit is CPI. So we pay very close attention to what CPI is. And we run our calculations, kind of base our maximum amount that we can have in our budget based off of CPI is oftentimes where we land. So the maximum amount that we could ask for our 2025 budget was 3.6%. So that's where we landed, and that would have gotten us an additional person. But because of some of the constraints that some of the municipalities were running into with having negative net new construction, they were really limited to that CPI number. So the board elected to kind of take their constraints into consideration, as they do, as we are, they're prudent taxpayers, and we try to recognize what every different municipality's constraints are and work with them in order to finalize a budget that is appropriate and at a solid level that everybody can finance. So we worked with them on that, recognized the constraints, and we were able to move forward with a 3% municipal increase for all of the municipalities that allowed us to maintain where we are at as an organization. And then we also have a plan moving forward. Our long-range financial plan that we currently have in place comes to an end at the end of 2025. So while we've been evaluating our services and how we are providing service to the communities and what our call volume looks like, we decided we're going to stand up our long-range financial planning committee in order to find ways to address that increase in call volume and find different ways to fund that as well. So we plan on looking at permit fee revenue, ambulance collection revenue, trying to come up with some different creative ways that we would be able to fund that don't necessarily rely on large increases from municipalities on an annual basis. So we are going to continue to move forward with that. At the October board meeting, we plan to come forward with a timeline for our long-range financial plan and some of the items that we want to consider as a part of that discussion for our board to review. So the 3% municipal increase that was approved by our board does include an increase that we had in WRS, an increase that we have in wages, which is only an estimated increase at this point in time that we believe to be competitive. We do not have an approved labor contract at this point in time. So we only have an estimate that is built in. We have started labor negotiations, but we do not have an approved labor contract. And as labor and benefits are about 85% of the North Shore Fire Department's budget, that's really a driving force for where our budget numbers fall. We have an increase built in for health insurance as well. And those are some of the largest pieces of expenses that we have that kind of drive up our numbers on an annual basis. So that is where the budget numbers land. And then as a part of the budget, you have these resolutions that follow and that all the municipalities have to take action on. So the main budget, our budget gets tied, our operating budget gets tied into your budgets, and your final approval of your budget is really the final approval of our budget. So a lot of what our board takes action on is recommending approval and finalizing our budget, but the real final stamp of approval and authorization and where we get our funding from is when all the different 7 municipalities also take action on our budgets and on these resolutions that you are considering as well tonight. So the first resolution, and does anybody, I guess before I dive into the resolutions, does anybody have any questions on any of the operating budget side and some of the expenses that I discussed on that end?
Trustee Stokbrand?
Forgive me, I'm not sure. I thought Chief Whitaker came before us last year and asked about, they were going to add a caseworker, I believe, to try to decrease the number of calls. And so was that person hired, and have you seen, if so, have you seen the effect that was expected?
We actually,
Yes.
you can't see, but Becky is here.
So I couldn't remember if it was the fire department or the health department.
It's both. It's fully funded in the fire department's budget, as well as a little sidecar of CDBG dollars. And we've had 3 months of outcomes, so we haven't really seen the needle move just yet. She's definitely hitting her stride and building rapport in the community. So good things are, I'm sure.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
No, this was very clear. Thank you.
All right. So with that, we'll probably move into the resolutions at this time. So you want to summarize the resolution of recommending single or multi-year capital budget for 2025, 2029?
Yes, I would. So this is a capital resolution that you all have before you. It has been approved. The recommendation for its approval has been approved at our board this last meeting. Last year, we switched to approving a single or multi-year capital resolution specifically for large apparatus on an annual basis. So the funding for the current resolution that is in place funds 2024 through 2028. Last year, we decided on an annual basis, we would bring back the single or multi-year resolution, and it rescinds the old resolution and it finalizes a new resolution to fund the large apparatus funding. So doing it this way always ensures that we have a 5-year period of approval for funding that coincides with our current capital improvement plan. And we did it this way because what we were finding was the time that it takes to get into a contract for an engine or a ladder truck specifically. You can enter into a contract. If I enter into a contract today for an engine or a ladder truck, I'm not going to see that engine or a ladder truck for 4 years. So we need to make sure we would generally not get into a contract before we knew that we had secured funding for that piece of equipment. So we wanted to make sure that we always had the secured funding to enter into these contracts as soon as possible and to take delivery of those pieces of equipment in a fashion that was consistent with where our capital improvement plan had placed them. So it was just redoing this annual resolution allows us to ensure that we have that 5-year period so that we can get into contract for these pieces of equipment as soon as we are able and take advantage of that reduced pricing, doing it sooner than later and being consistent with the schedule. So it's a recommending resolution at our board level, and then it goes to all of the different municipalities, and it requires all of the municipalities. I apologize. It requires all of the municipalities to approve the single or multi-year capital resolution as well. So you have 4 years that are already approved in the current resolution that is in place. This is going to replace that resolution, and it is going to add 2029, the funding for 2029. So it's just, it's generally been, the increases that we see from 1 year to the next is 2.75%. After 2026, the board wanted a higher increase in 2026 to know that we would be able to continue to fund these large apparatus purchases. So that was something we discussed with the board last year. And then from that point moving forward, it is anticipated to be a stable increase, which we deemed to be at that last year, 2.75%. So that is what we are proving as a part of the single or multi-year capital resolution in front of you.
Thank you. And with that, I would ask for any questions or a motion. Yes.
I move to approve Resolution 2024-12, approving a single or multi-year capital budget to purchase large apparatus equipment from 2025 to 2029.
Second.
Motion by trustee Stokbrand, seconded by trustee McGovern. Any discussion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee
Correct.
Ursink,
Yes.
President McKay,
Aye.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
Trustee McGovern,
Aye.
Trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
Trustee Kudo,
Yes.
Trustee Arndorfer.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to B2, resolution recommending 2025 North Shore Fire Department fee schedule. This is similar to the fee schedules that we routinely approve at the village level. Ms. Harrigan, is there anything that you would like to add, or should I just open it for questions?
And the only thing that I would add is that the increase that we use and generally see on an annual basis is just an increase in the emergency service fees that we charge for our ambulance and our EMS calls. So we use a CPI, an ambulance CPI factor, and that factor increase is 2.6%. So that's over 2024 current fees. And then there is no increase that we have built in for the fire prevention or administrative fees.
Thank you. Motion?
Yep, so I can move approval of resolution number 2024-13, a resolution approving the 2025 North Shore Fire Department fees for service schedule.
Second.
Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Arndorfer. Discussion?
I just want to applaud the North Shore Fire Department for working diligently to make sure that these fees did not increase exponentially. There are negligible increases in so many of these areas. So just wanted to say thank you to the chief and the department.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Please take it back. Mhm.
Thank you so much.
All right, this will be a roll call vote.
President McKay,
Aye.
Trustee Kudo,
Yes.
Trustee Land,
Aye.
Trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
Trustee McGovern,
Aye.
Trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
Trustee Ursink.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to B3, the resolution recommending adoption of a resolution allowing an option for a member municipality of the North Shore Fire Department, an exception to the levy limit for charges for the North Shore Fire Department pursuant to 2005 Wisconsin Act 484. So this is the resolution that recommends the 3%, approves a 3% increase.
So no, this final resolution is the resolution that is an annual resolution you have to, all the member municipalities have to approve. It does reference that 3.2% number in there and the 3% number in there. But what it does is, in order for, there's an adjustment on the levy limit worksheet that all of the municipalities fill out. in order to determine what they're going to bring in for the following year. And there is an adjustment on there for joint fire services. Line I allows you to take the increase in the fire department's budget and use that adjustment on your levy limit worksheet in order to bring in additional funding on your levy for your expense on the revenue side for the expenses that are necessary. So you don't have to use the adjustment, but every single municipality that is a part of our intergovernmental agreement and that participates in the joint fire service agreement needs to approve a resolution saying we are authorizing ourselves and any other municipality that wants to take advantage of this adjustment to do so. So every single municipality has to approve a resolution saying, yes, we're aware they're doing it and we're giving them authority in order to utilize that adjustment when they're completing their levy limit worksheet for the year. So again, doesn't say that you have to do it if you do not need to do it. It just is authorizing whomever needs to do it to do so. And then some of the additional information that is in the memo just says that the fire department, according to state statute, can increase their budget by no more than CPI plus 2% in order to take advantage of that adjustment. We are well below that because our intergovernmental service agreement is below that state statute threshold. We can only increase our budget by CPI plus 0.5%. So our intergovernmental service agreement is more restrictive than what state statute says. So because of that, we are always able to take advantage of that adjustment if any of the municipalities want to do so.
Thank you. With that, I'll open it to questions or a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2024-14, authorizing an exception to the levy limits for charges for the North Shore Fire Department pursuant to 2005 Wisconsin Act 484.
Second.
Motion by trustee Stokbrand, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any discussion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Land,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Yes.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee McGovern,
Aye.
president McKay.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. So that concludes our North Shore Fire Department budget presentation and action for this evening. Thank you very much, Ms. Harrigan. And I do see Chief Whitaker on the call. I hope you heard trustee Kudo's compliment and appreciation that I'm sure we all share.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Moving on, North Shore Health Department budget presentation. Thank you so much for being here in person.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. So all the information that I have to share tonight should be in your packet. I'm happy to elaborate and answer some questions. A little bit of context. Our intergovernmental agreement gives us the option of increasing our annual budget by the average of the collective bargaining for all the North Shore entities, if that makes sense, +1. And so everyone's still kind of in negotiations. It's a little early. But we have requested a 3% increase, and it's pretty on par with what we expect is going to come down from all of the other collective bargaining. Last year, we did not take advantage of this to give a little relief to the levy, but we came in around 1% increase last year, and still just absorbed our increases in pay. So some high level highlights. This year, we're on track for a budget surplus. I'm tentatively say that because, we just moved and there's a lot of expenses that happen with moving, but we are on the tail end of a large amount of COVID funding. So that's one of the things that's really impacted my department and of my colleagues across the county and the state. That money drying up is really tough, right? It really helped a lot for a long time. Thankfully, we did not staff any positions with that. We used it for programming. We used it for limited term employees. And so I'm not really feeling it. It's just my programming will shrink a little bit. Let's see. So we successfully consolidated 2 offices into 1, which we know will have some cost savings even just in rent alone. And my 2025 budget does project a deficit, but I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to bridge that gap before the year's end. Specifically, right now, I have $150,000 of grants that I'm still waiting to hear about from Milwaukee County, from the MCW and from DHS at the state. So I shot very low conservatively in my budget. And so I expect that that should be closed successfully. I can stop there for a second. I never breathe, so I'm happy to answer questions. So just a couple of challenges that manifested in the 25 budget. I mentioned those COVID grants that really helped us be flush for years and do special things like workforce development and build infrastructure and buy a building and build one. And so I do think that we did a really good job and put those dollars to good use. That'll have a lasting impact on the department. But there was a $25,000 cut to our public health emergency preparedness. It was a state error. And I fought really hard to keep that money. I went to 10 hours of meetings with the state to try to keep that money. That's a base allocation. And the short story is that when North Shore Health Department consolidated in 2013, they should have taken that base funding away in 2016, and they just found the error. And so I really tried to keep it. And I said, that sounds like a state error, not a health department error, but I did my best. A few other things that sort of impacted our bottom line were we have very much seen a dip in our clinic fees. Just we aren't giving COVID vaccines in the same way we were. They're commercialized. They're not coming from the government. And so we aren't able to bill administration fees on those the same way. So we're really trying a lot of creative ways. And I'm working right now with a credentialing specialist to get in network with more insurance providers. And I have some really good ideas. So we had to get the move out of the way before I could initiate some of those. But I'm confident we'll be able to be creative in that. And then also we're bare minimum, we're doing a 3% pay increase. As Caitlin mentioned too, staffing is my largest expense. I run a really tight operation actually. And my team is small but mighty, but I also have a highly trained staff. Just for a little context, there's a research study called Public Health Wins that showed 9% of the public health workforce in Wisconsin has public health training, and everyone on my team is a public health professional with, I think 6 of us have a master's of public health. So we pay for what we get. I can stop there. More short sections. Any questions? Okay. So I did make some strategic adjustments. Let's see, I think in July, our administrative assistant resigned and took a new position. And historically, it's my understanding that that position was a part-time position. It became a full-time position through COVID. And I realized really quickly that I can do most of those jobs and like most of the components of that, and I can do it more efficiently. So right now, that's a positive $60,000 impact by not replacing that role. We are full steam ahead, moving forward with increasing our license fees for our DADCAP, which is that we're an agent of the state. So we do our health inspections and pool inspections, things like that, and we bill for those licenses. That we should see at about $11,000 impact. That's positive. We're looking at, and so far baked into the budget now, we've eliminated paid internships for 2025. I might be able to fold that back in. I know that was a concern that sort of bubbled up through a trustee comment. And if and when I get these grants that are still out there, maybe we can get relief in some other budget line and still pay interns. It's really how we get the best candidates. And I think almost half my staff right now was an intern. And I got hired as an intern when I was working in the health department. So it's kind of when you get to like try people out for fit and with a low risk because they're making like $17 an hour instead of a salary with benefits. All right, I think that's about it. The only other budget highlight, in March of this year, we transitioned and have a new medical advisor. And that's just a small impact, but he does it for free, which is lovely. And we work under his license, and he's indemnified by the state as a result. So that was a $3,800 budget impact, but he mostly is giving a consultation to the nurse staff here and there, and we work under his license to give immunization. So just pulling from anywhere we can, but we're really committed to maintaining a high level of service and being present in all 7 North Shore municipalities. So I feel happy and confident. I think we're going to be okay. Questions? Yeah.
So like, will you have a flu clinic or a COVID clinic in Shorewood?
Yes, we will. And I'm happy to send those dates. We're doing 3 big clinics And we will be giving flu, and a partner from Kroger will come and do COVID. So really, anyone that's coming to the clinic won't really realize that it's not just all the health department, but we'll each be able to bill accordingly.
And what would the site be at the Village
Here,
Center?
down, sorry, where the,
Village Center,
yes,
below the library.
yes.
Okay.
And how does that get promoted or communicated?
It is on our social medias right now. I think as they were trying to figure out the last bits of information, so they're still out a few weeks, but I'll make sure folks get it and it'll be blasted in our. I think we have MailChimp. I think there's 8,000 people on our listserv, things like that. We'll get it out.
Sounds like an item for our manager's memo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there still funding available from the state for people that don't have health insurance to get COVID shots? Or I guess it was through the federal government previously.
Actually, no, the Bridge Access Program just shut down.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but we would give them, we would vaccinate people. So because we have vaccines for children and vaccines for adults, there's a variety of qualifying factors, but if someone was uninsured or underinsured, we would scoop them up at the health department.
Okay.
Just with state vaccine, not a program.
Yes.
Again, this, much like North Shore Fire, this looks like an exceptionally run well department. So thank you for doing all that you do with your small but mighty team. But
Thank you.
this really comes across as a serious value add for our communities. So
Thank you for that. We love our jobs, so thanks for having us. And I can't wait for you guys to see the new building. Come do a tour.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Waiting for the open house date.
Moving 2 offices into one, you're like, why do we have 85 hole punches?
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
a lot of kind of thinning things out right now, but it's good. It looks great.
You know, I think it was the North Shore Fire Department Board. We got a really awesome update on the case manager position, and that was where I had it. It wasn't, did we
Right.
remember to put it in our packet for our board?
We linked the packet for the fire
Okay,
department
let's
budget.
send it, if we could pull out your PowerPoint for the case
sure.
manager position and circulate it among the trustees, like part of the Friday update, that would be great. I think you'd find it really interesting. I'm really excited about that change.
Yeah, really that first 3 months, we did interviews really quickly, moved as fast as we could with making sure we got a rock star for the North Shore, and then built infrastructure and started to kind of get our sea legs and connect with people around how to make referrals. And we've automated a lot, which is great. We have access to the fire systems and we can pull reports. So we don't have to wait for a referral. We can just use the data to guide the practice. So when we see Becky Rowland, who fell 6 times in the last month, we're going to connect with her right away.
Yeah, thanks. Trustee Stokebrand.
I'm just wondering, it seemed to me that it was a really unusual case that happened with the apartments near Bayshore. And I'm looking through your staff here and I'm just wondering, was it mostly the environmental health specialist who dealt with that air?
It was me, 100%. But it finally got resolved. It's done.
Yeah.
It finished out like I think 2 weeks ago, I pulled the order. So it was a 15-month project.
So they're occupied again.
They are occupying currently. Yeah.
And is going forward, I mean, as we see more, I'll call them brownfields developed on the North Shore, will you just automatically be part of that occupancy permit or how is it?
So I work really closely with the building inspector, and now I have all of my wonderful colleagues at DNR who I've built a relationship over the last year and a half with. And so I'm happy to have a seat at the table and chime in and, defend the folks that are trying to build or who will occupy those buildings. But yeah, I think it
So
will be
you would
me.
be the
And
one who would connect them with someone that would test the air.
I'm trying to think about that answer. So we have actually a variety of air monitors already.
Oh.
And we have some colleagues that we could request one. I know recently I had an interaction with Brown Deer to put an air monitor in Brown Deer. So I wonder if I can just get it for Shorewood as well. Something I can look into.
It's not, I was just curious.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, then not. Have a good rest of the evening. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
All right,
everything that
appreciate
you do. And we will close that item. Oh, oops. So I think we have one more thing under this, my screen went to sleep.
Copy.
Bayside,
Mhm.
yes. Bayside Communications Budget
Mhm.
Report.
So there's no one here
Oh,
and
that's
available
right.
to present on this tonight, so they had provided a report which is located in your packet. If you have additional questions or comments, feel free to send those to me and we would follow up on them and provide response.
Thank you. So with that, we'll close the special orders of business for this evening and move on to item 5, consent agenda items. These items, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Arndorfer. Any discussion?
I'd like to remove item E.
E, as in every,
Did I say number E? Item E, as in Eric.
as in Eric, perfect.
I'll remove item B as in
Boy,
Bobby.
not your name. All right, we're getting a little crazy. All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the exceptions of 5B as in Bobby and E as in Eric? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 6, items removed from the consent agenda. 5B, consider regular village board meeting minutes, September 3rd, 2024. Trustee Ursink?
It's just a small little correction under citizens to be heard. It's listed as Kate Cooper with a K, and I think her name starts with a C, C-A-T-E.
I think she walked over to make that. No.
I got you.
All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented with that spelling correction, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on to 5E, consider approval for truck 32 repairs.
Yeah,
Trustee
Yeah.
Kudo?
yeah, I'm being kind of a pain about this one. But I was going through the work order, the estimate, and with my eye towards trying to save the village money whenever we can, I'm just wondering, I mean, some of these repairs, sorry, Dan, some of these repairs make total sense to me, 13,000 for some track and some damaging, but we have $500 in replacing decals.
Oh, that's coming off.
Okay.
I don't worry. No,
Yeah,
like I saw that one after I already submitted. I was like, too late.
yeah,
Mhm.
I was just, I mean, I'm looking at, pull some bolts, Loctite them and put them back on.
So those ones are for the lift,
Yeah,
which I will not touch.
Okay.
Due to they're up in the air 35 feet.
okay.
And if I touch that, they fall.
I mean,
I might feel responsible for that one a little bit.
I get that part. It was mostly just
The big ticket item is the hydraulic lines.
Right.
That run through the boom.
the 13,000.
Correct.
So, but it was the
The decals, when I saw it after I submitted, I
stickers
was
and
like,
decals. I was like, why
Yeah.
are we paying for
I
this?
fi- I figured you would see that one. I put it in there as a test.
Was it?
Yeah,
well, then
it's
I
just a
passed.
test.
Sounds like, would you like to make a motion at this time or are there further?
I mean, do I need to make a motion to remove
Yeah.
those items? Or do we
Well,
just
no,
make a
just
motion
to, we still have to take action on that item because it got pulled.
So I'll just move to S item E.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion by trustee Kudo, seconded by trustee Ursink. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. That concludes item 6. Item 7, we have no public hearings for this evening. Item 8, citizens to be heard. This item is for matters not on the agenda. Are there any citizens who would like to be heard this evening? All right, is there anyone online who would like to be heard? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to item 9, new business. Consider resolution 2024-11, amendment to the fee schedule. This comes to us from village manager's office.
Correct. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
My packet, I have, it's pretty jumbled here. I don't know if you,
So President McKay let me know about that. So this morning we actually uploaded a new version.
online,
Yes.
like on the website.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
But the memo and recommendations did not change from when it was recommended by the finance committee at the
Oh, so this
prior
comes to us
meeting.
from the finance committee with a with a recommendation to approve. If village board members would like a moment to review the corrected formatted memo, we can provide that time. Otherwise, I would take a motion. Trustee Stokbrand?
I move to approve resolution 2024-11, a resolution amending the village fee schedule.
Second.
Motion by trustee Stokbrand, seconded by trustee Arndorfer. Any discussion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee McGovern,
Aye.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
President McKay.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to 9B, consider extension to waste management recycling agreement. This item comes to us with a memo with a lot of links going back to 2018 or maybe even 14. I'm going to say in advance, if anyone has concerns around this request, if you have not read all the links, I'm going to ask to defer the item because there's a lot of information that really explains why we're getting this request to make an exception to the procurement policy. So with that, I would open it up. Yes, trustee Ursing.
So I'm just going to move that a waiver of the purchasing policy requirement be granted and that an extension of the recycling service contract with Waste Management be approved.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Ursing, seconded by trustee Stokbrand. Any discussion? Trustee Stokbrand?
Are there really any options? Is there anyone else doing this in the field?
Some of our neighboring communities do have GFL, which stands for Green for Life. That company was actually created as a part of the merger between Waste Management and Veolia. I'm not clear on exactly how they are or are not connected, but that's the primary competitor to Waste Management in the area. John Sanitation does do some. I believe they provide service to River Hills currently. At the time that we did our most recent RFP process, which was in 2016, 2017, they could not be competitive with Waste Management or Veolia at the time because they didn't own their own landfill. So options are quite limited.
It wasn't too long ago that we had some service complaints from residents, I think largely with alleys. How would you characterize the state of service levels at this point and their ability to address those?
For the most part, I've been encouraged over the last year to two. They assigned a new area supervisor. His name is Tim. He's been incredibly responsive to us. I think typically when we see issues, we see multiple issues over a period of time. And from what I can piece together, and Dan can chime in on this, is that typically occurs when our regular driver is out. They have subs that don't know the area, don't understand kind of some of the nuances. So most often that is where we see issues.
Emphatic head nod for Dan. Okay, thank you.
You think using Waste Management would be cheaper than bringing it in-house and having it be a village function?
You know, we've run those numbers. We did that about 6-7 years ago. I think with the proper facilities, a case could be made for the village doing it more cost effectively. I know we could provide better customer service. I am 1,000% confident in that statement. We would need an additional compactor in the transfer station. We would need a contract with a MRF or a material sorting and recycling facility. There are a lot of logistics. I think that's something that could be looked at in partnership with City of Milwaukee or other municipalities. It would not be possible or feasible at our current location.
And it's slightly out of scope for this evening as far as the extension. However, I do think it's a great conversation. We will naturally come back to it in the future. All right, Ms. Cooper? Yes, please. State your name and address and speak right into the microphone.
Kate Cooper, 3922 North Maryland. Doesn't it just make sense to get a bid from GFL? To see, I mean, I don't know what the time constraint is, but I am on an alley and they've done significant damage to a retaining wall. And we've had service issues, but also just budgetary wise, why not know what the options are?
I don't know if you were able to read the memo in the packet that gives the background.
I did read some of it. I didn't click every link.
Yeah, so it's only a 1-year extension, and the reasons being it's a combination of, so it's not like we're saying waste management for life. It's a 1-year extension, given that we don't know the future of the public works site and that the terms that we have are quite favorable to us. If we went out to bid, waste management would probably come up higher because we wouldn't be under the same contract. So that's the,
yeah.
But it's definitely not an endorsement that everyone's happy. Does that make sense? Leanne, did I do justice to that response, or is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's good. I mean, we're essentially operating off of the terms of a contract that we signed 6 years ago. I'm pretty confident that we would see price increases and possibly significant price increases if we opened that up.
But I do think similar to the conversation up here, it is a service item that with negotiating, when it comes up to negotiate for a new contract, I think it's going to be a really robust conversation. And I'm sorry, by the way, that's terrible.
So what are we budgeted for this item in 25? Or what would we be? Because we're basically approving it for the next calendar year, right? What did we pay in what are we paying this year?
Let's see, it'll be in the document that was provided this evening.
I remember just looking in the memo itself and didn't see it. It must be in a link.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's tens of thousands of dollars.
It's actually, if memory serves, and I apologize, I probably should know this off the top of my head, but please forgive me if this is incorrect. But the curbside recycling charges, we pay approximately $3 per household per month at 4,400 households. So and then when we add the payments for street cans, for servicing all of the village and school buildings, and then also the drop off at the DPW, I think we're in the neighborhood of 260, 255. But I'm doing that off the top of my head, and probably we should verify that before further discussion.
$2,000.
We have, 214 for disposable contracts recycling, 214,000 for 2025, and supplies for recycling 5,000. I don't know if I'm reading that right.
2% of our budget,
What?
close to 2% of our budget.
Yeah. That's 2025.
I'm sorry, so it was,
200, over 200,000.
$214,000 for disposable contracts for recycling, 214, 276, and then supplies for recycling, 5,000.
I'm going to have to vote no because I can't see that it's that difficult. If there's one other vendor, why not get a feel for the lay of the land and see what they'd come in at?
Well, I think we just went over all of that.
Okay, let's take a vote. So this will be just a voice vote. All those in favor of extending, there's a motion on the floor, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And a second.
All, trustee Ursing, seconded by Arndorfer, I
Nope.
believe.
Kathy.
Nope. By Kathy, okay. So all those in favor of the motion on the floor, which is to extend the waste management recycling agreement for 1 year as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1. Moving to 9C, consider service agreement for turf maintenance in 2025 to 2027. This comes to us with a memo. I hope everybody was able to review it. Chair of Public Works Committee, do you have anything to add?
Nope, it's just a sort of a long-term sort of situation with Volani, and it sounds like they have kind of improved quite a bit over the last year. So, and they are coming in as the lowest bidder in this list here. So,
Would you like to
hopeful.
make a motion?
Let's see, what do we got here? So I move to accept the proposal from Volani Land Shapers, Inc. for mowing only services for the 2025, 2027 years.
Second.
Motion by trustee Ursing, seconded by trustee Arndorfer. Any discussion? I'd just like to say in advance, thank you to the department for looking at how they can pitch into this, take on some of this responsibility to make it possible for us to get a bid at all. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 9D, consider service agreement for streetscape 2025, 2027. This also comes with a memo. Hopefully everybody was able to review it. Are there any questions or a motion? Trustee Ursing? Oh, trustee Kudo?
I do have a question. Do we know why that's just so much cheaper than the other bid? I don't mind going cheaper,
Mhm.
but this is.
And this is pure speculation. Volani has an idea of what's involved. Frankly, I'm surprised that their bid is that amount. We speculated over the last number of years that some of the reasons for the performance issues that we were having is they had significantly underbid the contract. SJ does they specializes a little more in some of the green, the green infrastructure areas and maintenance of those. So I think, I don't know, higher end isn't necessarily the correct term, but they employ, I think, a more specialized and more highly trained staff. And that's probably reflected in their fees.
Am I correct in remembering that we had problems with streetscape pulling the wrong vegetation and stuff like that? I mean, I just,
Probably. Yeah.
It's happened. It
Yeah.
has happened. Yeah.
Like I'm sure it happens everywhere. I'm sure there's a certain learning curve. But we're not even close to half for this contract.
Sure, Volani's learned a lot from their mistakes over the past 3 years.
Okay. I mean, I'll vote yes. I'm just,
Okay.
this was a stark difference. This
Mhm.
one.
It is surprising. I agree
Clarify.
with you. Well, we do have a motion on the floor, so we should take that motion, and if it fails, then somebody would like to make, or if you'd
I
like to
don't
withdraw.
think we have a motion yet.
Oh, I apologize. All right. So,
I can make one though.
okay. Or trustee Kudo, if you'd like to make an alternate. Okay.
Do you have any else to add to this, Leanne? I mean, is this the way you see it going? I mean, I would assume with our budget, we're not.
I do not. I think particularly with the challenges we have ahead of us, I think, you know, we're probably fortunate to have any level of service at that dollar amount.
Yeah. good. Okay. Well, with that, I move acceptance of the proposal from Volani Landshapers, Inc. for streetscape maintenance services for 2025 through 2027 at an annual cost of $25,039.
Second.
All right. Motion by trustee Ursing, seconded by trustee Stokebrand. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Awesome. Motion carries. 9E, consider 2025 budget poll. This comes to us from the Committee of the Whole earlier this evening. I believe all our questions were addressed and we had some discussion. So at this time, I would ask for, we are being asked to take action this evening so that it can be released. And with that, I would ask for a motion from the floor.
I move to approve the 2025 budget poll with the following revisions, and those were the addition of.
Well, I had Jim's suggested revisions for the parking meter question that you read earlier.
And then proposed dollar amounts for each level.
Oh, correct.
Sorry, this is not a great motion. I apologize.
But you do have Jim's recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
I-
also provided to you in the comments. We had reviewed it earlier. We just didn't change the screen because we wanted to have the discussion.
So it
here.
doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily, I don't have to change the motion to reflect the actual changes. You've got those changes.
Correct.
That's what's gonna be made. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, on that same question, I did recommend a change in the scale. What was?
Yes,
Okay.
that as well. Yep.
So there will be a levy increases question with multiple choices, 2, 4, 6, 8, right?
Oh, actually, is
Not
that the
quite
one?
Sure, we,
We did not take action on that.
I mean, I think you
So-
threw that out there, but I don't think we had a discussion about that.
Mhm.
Oh, I thought we did because we were gonna add them with the average cost per $350,000. Was what I thought we
Each,
left it for each option. So it was
okay.
153, 160, whatever it happened to be.
We're
But
just going to show that chart.
yeah, I
Mhm.
thought we got
And
there
I-
because
Okay,
Rebecca, she could throw the chart.
do that.
Throw
Okay.
the chart in there. Yeah,
That
that's
was
right.
my understanding from listening.
Yep,
Okay,
got
thanks,
you.
Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
Sorry.
Maybe the
And
motion
then
would
that we
be,
would- And then that we would put like every place where we have a possible charge, like vehicle registration, you put proposed $30 per year, recycle refuse charge, proposed 150 a year, one for the streetlights charge.
Mhm. So I would suggest that the motion be to approve the budget poll that reflecting the suggestions made during committee of the whole on September 16th.
Okay, so I move approval of the 2025 budget poll with the suggestions made within committee of a whole
On September 16th.
on September 16th. Thank you.
Second.
All right, motion by trustee Ursing, seconded by trustee Kudo. Any further discussion? Trustee Stokebrand?
I'll be voting no because I think this is an opportunity to ask about service levels. Missed opportunity. Get feedback.
Just reference the 2023 survey we did on service levels.
But not just about the public works. We didn't do library or, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we could do.
Noted for discussion purposes. Mhm. All right, with that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries 6-1. That concludes new business for this evening. Moving on to reports of village officials, village president, the link to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Council meeting is in your packet. I was not able to attend. Also the link for the North Shore Fire Department Board meeting from last week. And item 3, a proclamation for the Lake Bluff 100th anniversary. And I believe, sorry, I thought that's what that was. There's going to be a celebration, and I believe Trustee Lynn is going to represent us there to deliver the proclamation in the meeting.
Yes. Yeah,
All
the
right,
proclamation is going to be at, it looks like about 1 o'clock.
excellent. And that's this coming Saturday, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Well, I would love to read the proclamation at this time. Whereas Lake Bluff Elementary was designed for children and meant to be a comfortable place to stimulate their imagination and to help master their basic skills and grow physically and socially. And whereas the Village of Shorewood continues to celebrate the Historical Society's focus on the immense growth that has transformed the village in the decade of the 1920s. And whereas the Village of Shorewood realizes that we are indeed fortunate to have such a historically rich environment in our mile-by-mile square village. And whereas the Historical Society's founder's vision was to enhance life in the village by providing context from the past to help explain and enrich the present and support wise future decisions. And whereas the 100-year-old Eschweiler and Eschweiler designed Lake Bluff School still serves us well today, is an excellent example of that mission. Now therefore be it resolved that the village recognizes the Lake Bluff 100th anniversary. Dated this day, 16th of September, signed Village President. So thank you. And we wish everyone well in that celebration. And with that, we would move on to village trustees. And I would just like to say that my salad was made of all farmers market produce except for the beans. And I really feel grateful for that farmers market and the feast, even though I wasn't able to go. And so thank you, Trustee Ursink, for your footprint.
Stealing my thunder over here.
Oh, gosh. All right. Well, let me toss it to you to, I just wanted to, I should do a proclamation to you.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. No, I just wanted to say thank you to the Village of Shorewood and its employees and staff for coming out over the weekend and showing their support and helping us throw just, such a beautiful event that celebrates our community and everything great about Shorewood. We saw just such an increase in traffic this weekend at the feast. Everybody from people that were just families coming for food trucks and the music to attendees to our dinner. It was just a fantastic event. I can't give enough more credit to Janet Henning and Sarah Denev of the Bid. Just fantastic group of people and all of the volunteers. We had a wonderful group of 12 and 13-year-olds helping serve the dinner, and they did a fantastic job. I hope so, Mr. Kuto.
They were delightful.
And then I can remember at in the middle of the night, at the end of the night, I'm breaking down tables, in the middle of the street, and then Gabby Kudo comes up and she starts breaking down tables, gets her friends to break down tables and chairs, and then it was a whole group of 8th graders starting to just help put in the work, and that's what it's all about, right? It's that community spirit of everybody comes together and having fun, supporting one another, and just trying to work together to make this community a better place. And that was just on display 100% with the Shorewood Feast this weekend. So very proud of that event, and just a wonderful, wonderful day. Also, then the next day we had the Shorewood Farmers Market, and it just kind of, such a compliment to that event. Got to see, the same people that were at the feast the night before came out to the farmers market. It was such a beautiful day, just to see people come out, and it's really, for me, it's not about the food, it's about the coming together of the community, the socializing. Just everybody is just so happy at that farmers market. I don't see one upset person unless there's like the vendor that they really wanted is not there that weekend. It's not much we can do about that, but I think it's just a beautiful thing to see the people come out, support local food, support their community, have fun with their friends, and yeah, it was just a fantastic time. And also to have the trustees out there, to have Village Manager Ewald and her family come out. It was just a fantastic day, and I really appreciate your time, Manager Ewald, coming out there and supporting us and being a part of that. So thank you for that. And it was a great, and then tonight caps it all off. 3 days of Shorewood. It's just been fantastic. So
Village
you.
Board Palooza.
Great.
I would add again, on the farmer's market, I was there for the pop-up as well to talk to people about the budget and the things that we have coming up, and thought it went really well. I mean, it was, people, if you can flag them down when they're on their way to get like a fresh bagel or heirloom tomato and say, hey, I want to talk to you about water mains and property taxes, that's kind of a tough sell, but, really good conversations with a lot of people. And I think it's really a good opportunity for us to talk to people in a less formal setting and really just hear what people think about all these different things we're talking about. So just a really great day at the farmer's market for talking to people about all these big budget items that we have coming up.
Thank you.
So we had a library board meeting, a number of library board meetings in the last week or so. Just want to say thank you to Haley and her staff. They are in the final stages of hiring a new assistant director for the library, which is very exciting. They've had a ton of programming this summer. The youth services librarian has been wonderful. So they are firing on all cylinders, and things seem to be going really, really well over there. They had a bit of a bump in 2023, but they really have rebounded. And I think for most members of the community, there's been no discernible drop in production or services rendered. So I want to say thank you to them and to the library board that has really sort of gelled as a board in the last 6 months. So we look forward to bigger and better things as we move into the remainder of 2024 and into 2025. So.
Anyone else?
Oh, and one other thing, happy belated birthday to Trustee Arndorfer.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Thank you. 29.
Wow.
Once again.
Trustee Stokbrand.
It's my 30th wedding anniversary today.
Oh,
What are you doing here?
First of all, I want to apologize. I indicated to people that I would do a pop-up at the shops, and it was right before CDA Village Board meeting. And so I apologize. I did not make it. So I feel bad. I was looking at the schedule today for the communications plan, and the first one was me, and I didn't do it. So I'm sorry. On another note, though, I would like to, in the vein of thanking people, the things that volunteers bring to our village, as Trustee Ursink noted and Trustee Kudo, I would like to give a shout out to Barb Kylie Miller, who served 3 terms, 9 years on the Plan Commission. She was a diligent and detailed person, and I was on the Plan Commission with her for one of those years. And I also served with her on the task force for the commercial update, and she will be greatly missed. And I really appreciate, she really brought a lot to the table each time she came prepared, and was always someone you could count on to have done the work. And it's the kind of volunteer that we really need in this village, and that is what makes, besides the staff and the citizens, we're sort of the third wheel, I think, because the staff and the citizen volunteers are a large part of our community. So I'd like to thank Barb.
Yeah, can I just echo that? I mean, I served with Barbara for a number of years on the Plan Commission. Always just meticulously prepared, well-versed. Her, frankly, institutional knowledge about all things planning that has been going on for many years longer than I was involved in the village government. So sad to see her go, but she has served the village very, very well, and we were lucky to have her.
Thank you very much. All right, that concludes Village Manager. No report. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, any objections? We stand adjourned at 9:13. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.